March 1970, family compound of the capital military region. Old Master Fu sat on the sofa with a dark expression. He stared at his son who had just come back from outside and the woman wearing a triumphant smile, boiling over with rage. Beast, get down on your knees before me. At this roar, Fu Aigua knew full well that his secret act of signing Qingqing up for the countryside while the old master was away had been exposed. Yet what else could he do? Yaoao was in poor health. If she went to the countryside, she would surely not be able to endure the hardships. With that thought in mind, he dropped swiftly to his knees. Old Master Fu looked at his kneeling son, his gaze calm yet piercing. He stepped forward and slapped Fu Aigua several times. Beast, how dare you act so recklessly? You secretly signed your own daughter up for the countryside while I took Qingqing out to visit an old friend. Has your brain been addled? Qingqing is your own flesh and blood daughter. Ever since you married Jiang Meihua, your second wife, you have done everything for her daughter. Do not forget that Qingqing is your biological child. Hearing this, Jiang Meihua bit her lip tightly. She glanced up at the old master, her lips parting as if she wished to speak, yet in the end she said nothing and closed her mouth. Old Master Fu stared at his son, who knelt motionless like a block of wood. The more he thought about it, the angrier he grew. Fu Aigua. Sometimes I truly wonder whether you are even my own son. As commander of the Grand Military Region, how did I end up raising such a fool? After berating his son, the old master turned to his granddaughter sitting quietly on the sofa. His eyes instantly reddened. His dear granddaughter had grown up right beneath his eyes, gentle and sensible. How had she ended up with such an unreliable father? In the past, for the sake of this woman, he had insisted on divorcing his first wife. He had claimed their marriage had been arranged, forced her into a divorce, and promptly married Jiang Meihua. Crushed by the blow, his first wife had drowned herself in a river. His two grandsons had grown alienated from this household because of it and stayed in the military for most of the year. Recalling those events, the old master seemed to age 10 years in an instant. He had failed the Shin family and failed to keep his old friend's dying entrustment. Qingqing, grandfather is sorry. This muddle-headed man has signed you up for the countryside. News has spread far and wide. I know exactly what they are plotting. Rest assured. Even if I have to sacrifice my old reputation, I will never let you suffer out in the countryside. Hearing this, Fu Qingli's heart stirred slightly. She was not the real Fu Qingqing. She was a person from the year 2030, raised by an organization. Family affection was something foreign to her. From the original host's memories, she knew that in her past life, the old master had indeed gone to great lengths to prevent Fu Qingqing from being sent to the countryside. But their opponents had seized the opportunity to report them. The Fu family had nearly been exiled entirely. Though they narrowly escaped exile, the old master had been completely stripped of real power and given only an idle post. Fu Qingqing had still been forced to go to the countryside. A few years later, the old master passed away in melancholy. On her way back home, Fu Qingqing was abducted by human traffickers and taken deep into the mountains. She barely escaped, only to witness her father and brothers holding a celebration banquet for Fu Qingyao. She broke down completely. She rushed forward to attack Fu Qingyao, yet her face had already been ruined and her tongue mutilated. She could not utter a single coherent word. She was treated as a madwoman, brutally beaten, and thrown out of the house. Broken in body and spirit, Fu Qingqing died in despair under a bridge. Fu Qingli herself had died carrying out a mission. She had thought death was certain. When she opened her eyes again, she had traveled back to 1970 and become Fu Qingqing. Shortly after waking, she had seen a soul that looked exactly like herself. That soul was frail and faint, as though a gust of wind could blow it away. Before she could say anything, the soul bowed deeply to her, murmured, "You have come," and faded away completely. In this strange manner, she had become Fu Qingqing. Through the original host's memories, she witnessed every moment of the girl's tragic life. After seeing all of that, Fu Qingqing frowned. This experience was exactly like a novel she had read in her spare time. In the book, Fu Qingyao was the female lead, while Fu Qingqing was a doomed canon, fodder supporting character destined for a miserable end. Thinking of the original host's fate in the book, a cold smile tugged at Fu Qingli's lips. She did not know why she had crossed into the story. But now that she was here, no matter whether this was a book or reality, no one would use her as a pawn. At that moment, Fu Qingli lifted her eyes toward the old master and spoke softly. "Grandfather, it is all right. I actually wish to answer the nation's call and go to the countryside to temper myself. Old Master Fu grew anxious at once. Silly girl. Do you know how harsh life in the countryside is? I cannot bear to see you endure such hardship. Listen to me. I will sort everything out for you. Fu Qingli shook her head gently. Grandfather, news of my assignment to the countryside has spread everywhere. If you use your influence to reverse it, ill-intentioned people will seize this chance to stir up trouble. The Fu family will land in a very difficult position. People will accuse the Fu family of abusing power and ignoring national policy. If the matter blows up, we could face public criticism, and you might lose your position. Old Master Fu's expression darkened. He understood the risks perfectly. Yet he could not bear to send his own granddaughter to the countryside. Overwhelmed with anger, he raised his walking stick and struck Fu Aigua several times. Beast! Jiang Meiwa watched from the side. A flicker of distress crossed her eyes, yet she dared not step in for fear of drawing the old master's wrath onto herself. She shrank back, trying to make herself inconspicuous. Fu Qingli cast a cool glance at Fu Aigua. Fu Aigua happened to look back at her. Guilt showed in his eyes, yet it was shallow. Fu Qingli spoke in a calm tone. I can go to the countryside, but you must give me the jade pendant my mother gave you long ago. Fu Aigua froze. Xin Yan's jade pendant. He fell silent for a moment at the mention of the pendant, then nodded. Very well. I will fetch it for you right now. He stumbled to his feet, walked back to the bedroom, and opened a hidden compartment. He took out a small box. Inside lay the jade pendant along with several old pieces of jewelry. These were all Xin Yan's relics. He could not explain why he had kept them safe all these years. Now he would hand them over to Qingqing as a form of compensation. He also took out a bankbook, some cash, and food coupons from the cabinet. Carrying these things downstairs, he stopped before Fu Qingli. Qingqing, father knows I have wronged you. These are all your mother's things. Take them. Fu Qingli took the small box and merely glanced at him without speaking. Fu Aigua then held out the bankbook, cash, and food coupons. This is compensation from me. Rest assured, after you go to the countryside, I will send half of my salary to you every month. Fu Qingli was somewhat surprised, yet she said nothing. Jiang Meiwa's composure cracked the moment she saw the box of jewelry, the bankbook, cash, and food coupons. When she heard that half of her husband's salary would be sent to that girl, she lost her temper and shouted angrily. Do you realize what you are saying? If you give her all that money, how are we supposed to live? The old master banged his walking stick hard against the floor. Be quiet. You know perfectly well who ought to have been sent to the countryside. Do not take advantage of others and still complain. Jiang Meiwa was cut short. She wilted like frost, bitten greens, and dared not utter another word. The old master waved his hand. Get out of my sight. Jiang Meiwa quickly helped Fu Aigua back to their room. Old Master Fu stared at their retreating figures and sighed heavily. If his eldest son were still alive, he would have driven this muddle-headed man out of the house and severed all ties with him. Thoughts of his eldest son cast a shadow over his gaze. Granddaughter, come with me. Old Master Fu led Fu Qingli upstairs to his bedroom. He opened a cabinet and took out a box filled with various coupons and cash. Take these, granddaughter. They are from me. He then retrieved 2 more bankbooks from his safe and pressed them into Fu Qingli's hands. Fu Qingli looked at the bankbooks and food coupons and tried to decline. Grandfather, please do not. I already have money. Old Master Fu shot her a stern look. Silly child. Take them. What if I die of anger because of that fool one day? All these things would end up in their hands otherwise. He arranged for you to go to the countryside because of that childhood, arranged engagement. He wants to send you away to make room for his stepdaughter. You have suffered, my girl. But rest assured, I will not let him snatch your fiancé away. Something clicked in Fu Qingli's mind. A faint smile touched her lips. Grandfather, if Fu Qing'ao likes Song Yang so much, let her marry him. Old Master Fu stared in shock. Qingqing, do you understand what you are saying? Weren't you fond of Song Yang since you were little? Fu Qingli answered calmly. Grandfather, I was never truly fond of him. I was merely close to him because I knew he was my fiancé from childhood. Yet Song Yang has always been indecisive. Between Fu Qing'ao and me, he always chooses her. Grandfather, I do not want him anymore. Old Master Fu fell silent for a while and nodded in agreement. Very well. If you do not want him, I will go and break off the engagement. It was only a casual agreement made over wine between myself and his grandfather, with no binding force. I will go and make our position clear at once. Fu Qingli quickly held him back. Grandfather, could you wait 2 days before you go? The old master thought she was holding back her true feelings out of pride. Child, if you do not truly wish to end it, I can find a way, Fu Qingli cut him off. That is not it, grandfather. If you go to dissolve the engagement out of the blue now, the Song family will make things difficult for you. Trust me, grandfather. Just wait 2 days. I will make the Song family willing to end the engagement of their own accord, and they will even offer us an apology. Seeing how resolute her expression was, old Master Fu finally nodded. Seeing her grandfather consent, Fu Qingli said, Grandfather, I will head back to my room now. Go on then. Back in her room, Fu Qingli recalled the plot of the novel. If she remembered correctly, Fu Qingyao and Song Yang had already formed an intimate secret relationship. The following night, they would meet at their usual rendezvous spot. Fu Qingyao would tell Song Yang that she was being sent to the countryside. A cold smile curved Fu Qingli's lips. In this life, she would bring both of them public disgrace. She would see how they could enjoy their loving bond and the admiration of others. She took out the jewelry box Fu Aigua had given her and picked up the jade pendant. According to the novel, all these treasures would eventually fall into Fu Qingyao's possession. By chance, Fu Qingyao would unlock a spatial dimension hidden within the pendant. She would become a revered healer and gain the favor of many powerful figures. Fu Qingli stroked the surface of the jade pendant with her fingertips and smiled faintly. Too bad for you, Fu Qingyao. This space is mine now. She pricked her finger gently. A glistening bead of blood welled up. She let the drop of blood fall onto the jade pendant. The pendant burst into dazzling white light. Blinded, Fu Qingli closed her eyes, and in the next instant she vanished from the room. When she opened her eyes again, she was stunned by what she saw. Where was this place? The scenery was breathtaking. Butterflies danced through the air, rolling mountains stretched into the distance. Clear, crystal, clear water flowed in a stream beneath her feet. She took a few steps forward and spotted a spring, fed well beside the stream. Where on earth was she? Had she traveled to some immortal realm again? Just then, a clear, ringing voice echoed. Welcome to the Spirit Spring Space. I am the Space Spirit. A brightly colored multi-hued bird flew down before Fu Qingli. Fu Qingli looked at the lively bird. A space spirit? What do you mean by that? The colorful bird replied, I am the spirit of this space. I can help the master manage everything here. Recalling stories she had read, Fu Qingli asked, so this is a space inside the jade pendant, and you are its spirit? Precisely, the colorful bird said proudly. Fu Qingli frowned. This was not how events had been described in the novel. Had fate granted her this special gift because of her rebirth into this world? If so, it was a wonderful stroke of luck. She asked, can anyone open this space? Certainly not, the colorful bird answered. Only direct descendants of the Shin bloodline may open it. This jade pendant passes down through female heirs only and recognizes only direct bloodkin. Fu Qingli repeated under her breath, only direct bloodkin. Could there be some hidden connection between herself and the original Fu Qingqing? She pushed the thought aside and listened to the bird continue. A long time ago, the old master ascended to immortality and placed a powerful restriction on the jade pendant. Only his direct blood descendants may unlock it. The colorful bird paused for a moment before adding, after thousands of years, it might be unlocked by someone of immense karmic fortune. Yet even such a person could not truly enter the space. They could only draw 1 drop of spirit spring water each day and use its storage function. Nothing more. Fu Qingli understood at once. Fu Qingyao must be that person of immense karmic fortune, for she was the female lead of this world. That explained why, in the novel, Fu Qingyao could only heal 1 person each day. She relied solely on that single daily drop of spirit spring water. She had never imagined that someone from the Shin family had once attained immortality. She wondered silently about it, but dared not ask, fearful the bird would realize she was not the real Fu Qingqing. She then asked, what would become of the jade pendant if all its direct blood descendants perished? The colorful bird tilted its head and thought. If the space still holds ample energy, the pendant will seek out a new destined owner. If its energy is exhausted, it will fall dormant and become nothing more than an ordinary piece of jade. Fu Qingli nodded slowly. She looked at the bird. Do you have a name? The colorful bird chirped excitedly. Master, I do. I named myself the multicolored divine bird. Is it not a magnificent title? Fu Qingli smiled at its proud demeanor. It is indeed very grand. Puffed up with pride, the bird tossed its head. I always thought so. Far better than the silly name the old master gave me. Amused, Fu Qingli asked, What name did the old master give you that you dislike so much? The bird grew awkward and mumbled softly. He never gave me a proper formal name. He just kept calling me silly bird. A faint smile tugged at Fu Qingli's lips. Fitting enough. Fortunately, it could not tell she was not the real host. That was for the best. She walked toward the medicinal fields and gazed out over the endless expanse of precious herbs, sighing softly. So many rare medicinal plants, yet she knew little about medicine. Her gaze fell on the well beside the fields. Could this be the fabled spirit spring? The colorful bird chirped excitedly. Master, that is the spirit spring water. Drinking it regularly prolongs life and improves health. Fu Qingli was overjoyed. She reached out and brushed her fingers against the well's stone rim. The stone felt cool yet suffused with gentle spiritual energy. Merely standing nearby filled her with vitality and comfort. A strange current stirred inside her body. She calmed herself to examine it. Realization struck her, and she laughed aloud. Her superpowers had come along with her. She thought of her dual fire and wood affinity abilities and smiled. She had been reborn, yet her powers had traveled with her. A cold glint flashed in her eyes. In the past life, Fu Qingao had relied on that single daily drop of spirit spring water to save lives, win people's loyalty, and climb to a revered status, trampling the original host beneath her feet. In this life, without the spirit spring water and this heaven-sent opportunity, how much of Fu Qingyao's so-called heroine's aura would remain? Meanwhile, inside the Fu family compound, Fu Qingao suddenly felt a tight ache in her chest, as if something precious had been torn away from her life. The feeling was deeply unsettling and made her irritable. A thought occurred to her. She hurried inside to find Jiang Meihua. Jiang Meihua was just stepping out of a room. She shot her daughter an annoyed look. Why are you in such a frantic rush? Fu Qingao wasted no time on explanations. Mother, do you remember that jade pendant that belonged to Xin Yan? Jiang Meihua rolled her eyes. Of course I remember it. Give it to me quickly. Fu Qingao urged. Jiang Meihua looked troubled. Your father gave that pendant to that girl. Fu Qingyao's vision swam. What? He gave the pendant to her. Jiang Meihua quickly clapped a hand over her daughter's mouth. Keep your voice down. If your father hears you speaking of her like that, you will regret it. Fu Qingao pulled her mother's hand away in anger. Mother, tell me how father ended up giving Fu Qingqing that pendant. Jiang Meihua gave her a scornful glance. What else? The old man found out your father had signed that girl up for the countryside. She demanded the pendant from your father. Overcome with guilt, he handed over the pendant along with all of Xin Yan's old jewelry. Fu Qingao shuddered. Grandfather knows? What did grandfather say? She feared old Master Fu most of all. His sharp eyes could see straight through all her pretenses. Jiang Meihua snorted. What could he say? News has spread everywhere. Unless he humiliates himself by pulling strings, he cannot reverse the assignment. Fu Qingao breathed a sigh of relief. Even so, the thought of the jade pendant weighed heavily on her heart. She felt as though that pendant ought to have belonged to her. She skipped dinner and returned to her room. Lying on the bed, she tossed and turned until she drifted off to sleep. She dreamed that the jade pendant was hers. In her dream, the pendant possessed marvelous power. Every day it produced a single drop of water. That water could cure illnesses and promote longevity. She named that drop of water the Immortal's Water. She had used this jade pendant to rise high in status, falling deeply in love with Brother Songyang to become an admired couple envied by all. In her sleep, Fu Qingyao's lips curved into a soft smile, her face brimming with happiness. Until a knock at the door jolted her awake in the early morning. She sat up dazedly in bed, gazing at the faintly brightening sky. It had all been just a dream, yet why had it felt so vividly real? Still half dazed, Fu Qingao got out of bed, freshened up quickly, and headed to the dining hall for breakfast. At the table sat old Master Fu and Fu Qingqing. Fu Qingao greeted them politely. Grandpa, Sister Qingqing, Mom, Dad, good morning. She then sat down and began eating. Silence hung over the dining table throughout the meal, and soon everyone had finished their breakfast. Old Master Fu glanced at Fu Aigua. In 2 days, Qingqing will leave for the countryside. Where have you signed her up? Show me the papers. I want to see if any of my old war comrades are stationed there to look out for her. At once, Fu Aigua replied hastily, Father, I signed Qingqing up for a farm 50 li outside the capital city. It's quite close to us. If we miss her, we can take a carriage to visit her easily. Old Master Fu shot him a sharp glance. You do have a shred of conscience, though not much. Meanwhile, Jiang Meiwa's hand trembled at those words, and she nearly spilled the tea in her cup. Fu Qingli watched Jiang Meiwa's pale face and curled her lips faintly. 50 li from the capital, huh? If her memory served her right, it had been Jiang Meiwa who had abused Fu Aigua's authority. To reassign her countryside location to Harbin in Heilongjiang province in the far northeast. If not for fear of public gossip and old Master Fu's wrath, Jiang Meiwa would have sent her all the way to the remote northwest. Hearing this, Fu Qingao hastily stood up, afraid trouble would land on her. Father, mother, grandpa, sister, I have things to attend to. So I must take my leave. Without waiting for old Master Fu or Fu Aigua to respond, she hurried out of the house. Old Master Fu pursed his lips at her flustered behavior, then glared at Fu Aigua. Blind fool. You neglect your own granddaughter. And dote on an outsider instead. People would think Fu Qingao was your real daughter. Just then, a guard knocked at the door. Commander, people from the Educated Youth Office are here. At the news, old Master Fu waved his hand. Show them in. Jiang Meiwa's hands began to shake uncontrollably. Noticing her state, Fu Aigua asked anxiously, "What's wrong with you?" Jiang Meiwa stammered, nothing. I just feel unwell. I'll head back to my room first. Fu Aigua stood quickly. Let me help you. He supported Jiang Meiwa as they walked upstairs. The men from the Educated Youth Office stepped forward respectfully before old Master Fu. Commander, here is the list of educated youths. Departing for the countryside in 3 days. Please look it over. Old Master Fu took the document. When he saw Fu Qingli's assigned location was Harbin in Heilongjiang province in the northeast, his vision swam. How could this be? He grabbed his glasses from the side table, slipped them on with trembling hands, and read the list over and over. To confirm the information. Then he waved the men away. Very well. You may go. Sensing the commander's foul mood, the men left in haste, anxious not to get caught in his anger. No sooner had they stepped out the gate than a furious roar boomed from inside the house. Fu Aigua, you worthless wretch. Get in here at once. The men quickened their pace in fright. Inside the courtyard, old Master Fu flew into a rage, charging toward Fu Aigua with his walking cane raised. Fu Aigua shrank back in alarm. Father, what are you doing? Why strike me? I am a division chief already. Deaf to his protests, old Master Fu swung his cane again and again, beating Fu Aigua, who yelped in pain. Jiang Meiwa collapsed in terror onto the stairs. Outside the compound, the men from the Educated Youth Office pressed hands to their chests in shock. Good heavens, the commander's glare was terrifying. One urged the others. Hurry, let's go. They fled the troublesome premises. Back inside, old Master Fu grew exhausted. He dropped his cane and sank onto the sofa supported by his guards, gasping for breath. Disappointment filled his gaze as he stared at Fu Aigua. You reckless wretch. I should have strangled you at birth. Before you could bring misfortune upon my granddaughter. Fu Aigua nursed his aching body and touched his face. Thank goodness he had shielded it, or he would never have been able to show his face in public. Anger flared inside him. Father, have you lost your mind? I am a division chief. How dare you beat me without cause? Old Master Fu laughed bitterly. Without cause. He tossed the countryside assignment list straight at Fu Aigua. Furious, Fu Aigua picked it up. Staring at the paper, he froze in shock. What is this? Why is Qingqing assigned to Harbin in Heilongjiang? He rubbed his eyes and read again in disbelief. I signed her up for a village 50 li outside the capital. How did this change to Heilongjiang? Old Master Fu cast a cold glance toward the woman slumped on the stairs. You ought to ask your dear wife. Fu Aigua turned toward Jiang Meiwa, unable to believe it. It wasn't you, was it? Jiang Meiwa flinched. She knew denial was useless. Old Master Fu could uncover the truth with a single investigation. Her voice shook. I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. On impulse, I changed the assignment location. Fu Aigua closed his eyes in despair. Notices had already been issued. There was no way to alter it now. Why would you do this? You forced me to marry you, and I complied. Xin Yan even took her own life because of it. What more do you want? Fear finally seized Jiang Meiwa. She scrambled down the stairs and clung to Fu Aigua's legs. I'm sorry, Aigua. I never meant for this to happen. Qingqing looks more and more like Sister Nian. The sight of her terrifies me. That is why I changed the location. I'm sorry. I was afraid you would see her and think of Sister Nian and abandon me. You are all I have left. I lost my ability to bear children saving you. I feared you would grow disgusted and cast me aside. Forgive me, Aigua. At her mention of losing her fertility saving his life, Fu Aigua closed his eyes. He owed her that debt. He slowly opened his eyes and looked at Fu Qingli, who sat composed on the sofa. He tried to speak, yet his throat felt blocked and no words came out. Fu Qingli saw his conflicted expression and curled her lip. Conscience pricking you, are you? Too late. The real Fu Qingqing is long gone. Still, Fu Aigua was of use to her. She could not break with him yet. She wanted to see him and Jiang Meihua torn apart, tormenting one another. Besides, she still needed the monthly stipend. She would not let Jiang Meihua and Fu Qingao get their hands on it. She turned to old Master Fu. Grandpa, going to the northeast is not entirely bad. The winters are harsh, but they only farm one crop a year. There is plenty of free time. I think it will suit me well. Old Master Fu sighed heavily. Alas. He looked toward Fu Aigua. Blinded by a debt of gratitude, you drove Xin Yan to her death. And alienated your own sons. Now even Qingqing is being sent to the bitter cold of Heilongjiang. Do you understand just how brutal the climate there is? Is this truly the life you wanted? Old Master Fu picked up his cane and shuffled toward his study. He would telephone his old comrades to find out who held power in Heilongjiang. No matter what, he would ensure his granddaughter was cared for. Fu Aigua stared at his father's stooped back, a surge of sorrow washing over him. When had that once upright spine begun to bend? Had it been when his eldest brother died in battle? When Xin Yan took her own life? Or when his son stayed away year after year, leaving the old man lonely? His eyes stung with tears. Recalling his father's words, he squeezed his eyes shut, lost in confusion. Was this really the life he had wanted? Beside him, Jiang Meihua read his troubled expression and dared not utter a word. After a long pause, Fu Aigua fixed a long, heavy stare on Jiang Meihua. Her whole body trembled beneath his gaze. Hatred and regret were plain in his eyes. Did he regret marrying her? Then Fu Aigua looked at Fu Qingli, his voice hoarse. Qingqing, father has wronged you. He straightened his clothes and walked out of the courtyard. Jiang Meihua hurried after him. Aigua, where are you going? Fu Aigua did not look back or reply. Only 3 days remained. He had to pull every string he could. He could not let Fu Qingli suffer out in the countryside. As for Jiang Meihua, he could not bear to face her right now. Jiang Meihua turned back dejectedly, only to spot Fu Qingli seated on the sofa watching her with a faint, mocking smile. Rage flared within her. She stormed over and hissed in a low, vicious tone. You little wretch. Are you enjoying this? Fu Qingli gave her a cool glance. Dropping your act at last? Jiang Meihua snorted. The mask is off. What can you possibly do? I sent you to Heilongjiang and I can destroy you there, mark my words. Fu Qingli clapped her hands softly, leaned forward, and whispered coldly beside her ear. Go ahead and try. And watch your tongue. Or I will be happy to discipline you. Jiang Meihua opened her mouth to retort, only to meet the sharp, icy killing glint in Fu Qingli's eyes. Fear jolted through her. How could this formerly timid young lady possess such a terrifying look? She swallowed hard and stepped backward. We shall see about this. She fled back to her room in panic. Fu Qingli watched her hurried retreat, a cold smile playing on her lips. Already frightened? She walked to old Master Fu's study and knocked gently. Grandpa, may I come in? Enter. Fu Qingli stepped to his side. Grandpa, do not worry about me. I will be fine. Old Master Fu patted the spot beside him, letting her sit down. He stroked her head gently, heavy remorse in his voice. Granddaughter, I have failed you. Fu Qingli took his rough, warm hand in hers. Grandpa, it is truly all right. There is something I wish to discuss with you. Old Master Fu grew serious at once. Speak your mind. I want to change my name. Old Master Fu blinked in surprise. Change your name? Is Qingqing not good enough? Fu Qingli said softly, I had a dream. In it, I was told this name brings misfortune. I wish to be called Fu Qingli. Li as in colored glaze. Old Master Fu repeated the name under his breath. Fu Qingli. Very well. If that is what you wish, I shall make the call right away to complete the formalities. Thank you, Grandpa. Silly child, no thanks are needed between us. Old Master Fu picked up the telephone and sent a guard to the household registration office. Before long, the new household register was delivered. Fu Qingli held the newly printed page, the corners of her mouth lifting. At last, she had her new name. Old Master Fu smiled seeing her joy, thinking what an easily satisfied girl she was. Fu Qingli looked at him and warned softly. Grandpa, something important may happen tonight. Take care not to overexert yourself with anger. Old Master Fu gave her a mock glare. What could be worse than your foolish father sending you off to the countryside? You said it, Grandpa. I shall take my leave now. Off you go. Returning to her bedroom, Fu Qingli locked the door and slipped into her spatial realm. She froze the moment she arrived. A 3-story bamboo building had appeared within the space, seemingly out of nowhere. She wondered how she had missed it the day before. Pushing open the door, she saw shelves neatly lined across the first floor, filled with valuable ornaments. Rows of wooden crates lay stacked on the ground. She pried one crate open and gasped. It was brimming with gleaming gold bars. She opened another, and it too was full of gold. Fu Qingli swallowed hard. Were all these crates stuffed with gold and jewels? She pried open a third crate, filled with glittering jadeite jewelry that shimmered brilliantly. She climbed the stairs to the second floor. It housed jades, paintings, ancient inkstones, and other exquisite antiques. On the third floor, the space was split into 2 sections. Along one wall stood shelves of medical texts, beside a writing desk and chair. Hanging on the wall was a portrait of a woman who bore an 8 or 9-fold resemblance to herself. Fu Qingli's heart stirred. Could this have been the original owner of the spatial realm? A large jade screen partition divided the other half of the floor, hiding a bedchamber with a full-size bed carved from a single block of jade. She stared at the magnificent bed. Could this be the legendary cold jade bed? When she touched its surface, it was not cold at all, but pleasantly warm to the touch. It must have been carved from warm-toned jade. She could scarcely imagine its immense value. What kind of person could afford such a grand bed? Nearby stood rows of wardrobes and a dressing table. Opening a wardrobe, she found a fine collection of clothing hanging inside. She did not rummage through them further and descended the stairs, her mind still reeling. At that moment, the colorful divine bird flew down and perched lightly on her shoulder. Master, are you looking at these treasures? Fu Qingli composed her racing thoughts and turned to it. Where did all these come from? Why did I not see this bamboo building when I came in yesterday? The divine bird rubbed its head with a small wing. They have always been here. Did you not notice them before? Fu Qingli fell silent. Perhaps she had been so excited by the spiritual spring water yesterday that she had overlooked this huge building. She pointed toward the hundreds of crates. Are all these crates filled with similar treasures? She gestured toward the crate she had opened. The colorful divine bird chirped yes. These were collected by successive owners of this space. I never understood why they hoarded such useless things. It nodded its head toward another corner. Over there, someone dumped a heap of rubbish. Fu Qingli followed its gaze and her eyes widened. Piled there were grain, oil, rice, flour, meat, eggs, dried goods, and all kinds of daily supplies, enough to stock a small general store. She stared at the bird, speechless. You call this rubbish? The divine bird tilted its head. Indeed. I have never seen the person who left them. Luckily, everything stays exactly as it was when brought into the space, otherwise it would all have rotted long ago. If I ever catch that litter bug, I will beat them soundly. Fu Qingli stared at the supplies and sank into deep thought. Could these have been stockpiled by Fu Qingao in her past life? If so, they had fallen right into her lap. Though it was the 1970s, countless people still went hungry. In 3 days, she would depart for the countryside. She needed to learn more about the materials and prices of this era. She had only been living in this world for 3 days. She had not stopped Fu Aigua and Jiang Meihua from signing her up for the countryside, fearing old Master Fu would detect she was not the real granddaughter if they spent too much time together. Thinking of the grandfather who had truly loved the original girl, Fu Qingli sighed softly. She had never meant to take over this body. After her death, she had not passed on to the underworld, but had been reborn into this life instead. Yet if she told old Master Fu the truth, would he believe her? She could not bear to picture his heartbroken, disappointed face upon learning the truth. So she had not interfered with their countryside assignment. A few years living in the countryside would explain great changes in her temperament. By then, old Master Fu would hopefully harbor no suspicions. Recalling the events planned for that night, Fu Qingli exited the spatial realm. She gathered her money and ration tickets and left the compound. Soon she arrived at the department store. She shopped the whole afternoon, learning about the goods and prices of this era. She was astonished by how inexpensive everything was. She bought 2 sets of Dacron trousers and blouses, 2 dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, plus daily necessities including basins, towels, and soap. She also selected a new outfit and pair of shoes for old Master Fu. Moving to the grocery section, she bought malted milk extract and egg cakes. Though her space held more than enough of these goods, she could not leave for the countryside empty-handed. She needed to carry something for appearances. That afternoon, Jiang Meiwa watched Fu Qingli return carrying large bags of purchases and rolled her eyes. Spending money not earned by herself without the slightest hesitation. At the thought of that money, she shot her a cold glance and went back to her room. Ignoring her, Fu Qingli carried her packages upstairs, then headed toward old Master Fu's quarters. "Grandpa, look. I bought you new clothes and shoes. Please try them on and see if they fit." Old Master Fu's eyes lit up seeing the gifts from his granddaughter. My good girl has truly grown up, thinking of her old grandfather. "Quickly, let me try them on." He changed into the new clothes at once and turned before the mirror, looking himself over from every angle. "My granddaughter has excellent taste. These clothes fit perfectly. I feel dozens of years younger." Fu Qingli laughed. "Grandpa, you exaggerate." "I am not exaggerating one bit. I must go out and show everyone how thoughtful my granddaughter is." Before Fu Qingli could speak, old Master Fu hurried out, even forgetting his cane. Fu Qingli shook her head helplessly and returned to her own room. She locked her door and entered the space again. Before leaving for the countryside, she wanted to brew ginseng wine for her grandfather. She pulled a ginseng root from the space, washed it clean by the stream, placed it inside a wine jar she had bought in town, and poured in the liquor she had purchased. Then she walked to the spiritual spring and dropped in one drop of its water. The colorful divine bird flew before her. "Master, what are you doing?" "I am brewing ginseng wine for my grandfather." The divine bird circled the jar. "This ginseng is at least 500 years old. Combined with a drop of spiritual spring water, drinking a small cup each day will prolong his life and strengthen his body. It is perfect for your grandfather." Fu Qingli looked surprised. "This ginseng is 500 years old?" "Indeed. Even the youngest medicinal herbs in this space are at least 100 years old." Fu Qingli had no idea that the ginseng plant she had casually plucked was already 500 years old. No wonder it had begun to take on a vaguely human-like shape. "All right, I'm heading out now." Just then, the old man came back from outside. Seeing Fu Qingli holding an earthen jar, he hurried over. "Granddaughter, what are you doing carrying that jar?" Fu Qingli smiled gently. "Grandpa, I've brewed a jar of ginseng wine for you." At the mention of ginseng wine, the old man's eyes lit up at once. "My granddaughter is so thoughtful." He quickly called over the guard to carry the wine jar into his room. After the guard had set the jar down and withdrawn, the old man lifted the lid in eager anticipation. The moment he laid eyes on the ginseng inside, his eyes went wide. "This." He hastily closed the lid again, pulled Fu Qingli over, and lowered his voice. "Girl, tell Grandpa the truth. Where did you get this ginseng? Did you spend all the money I gave you?" "Child, why didn't you keep some money for yourself?" Fu Qingli soothed him at once. "Grandpa, don't worry. I came across this ginseng by chance. It hardly cost me anything." Old man Fu stared at her. "Really? You aren't lying to this old man." "Of course it's true. But Grandpa, you may only drink one small cup of this wine each day. Don't have too much. Too much will harm your health." Stroking the wine jar, the old man grinned from ear to ear. "Naturally. I'll savor every drop. This wine was brewed for me by my own granddaughter." Seeing how happy he was, Fu Qingli smiled too. "Grandpa, I'm going back to my room to sort out my things for going to the countryside." At her words, the old man sighed softly. "Granddaughter, rest assured. I will get you transferred back as soon as I can." "Yes, Grandpa. I understand. I'll take my leave now." "Go on then." Back in her room, Fu Qingli lay on the bed for a while. She glanced at the time, and the corners of her mouth curved upward. The show was about to begin, and she could hardly wait. With a little spare time on her hands, Fu Qingli stepped straight into her spatial dimension. She took a sip of spiritual spring water, then sat cross-legged beside the spring and devoted herself to cultivation. About 2 hours passed before Fu Qingli's eyes flew open, undisguised shock in her gaze. Her superpower had awakened. It was only at the very initial, elementary stage. Her power was still faint. She could only conjure a tiny wisp of flame, yet for her, that was more than enough. She left her spatial dimension, glanced out the window at the deep night, quickly changed into dark night clothes, and leapt out of the window. She nimbly avoided the guards posted at the gate and slipped soundlessly to the outer wall of the compound's rear warehouse. From inside the warehouse came faint rustling sounds. Fu Qingli's lips tugged into a faint smile. With a flick of her fingertip, a tiny flame landed precisely on a pile of sundry goods stacked beside the warehouse. The spark slowly licked at the dry firewood, and the fire crept outward little by little. Hearing the commotion coming from inside the warehouse, Fu Qingli turned toward the guard's duty room and deliberately made a soft noise some distance away. The guards instantly grew alert and shouted sharply, "Who's there? Come out." When the guards hurried toward the sound, Fu Qingli darted away and vanished into the thick night, leaving only a fleeting shadow behind her. "Who's there? Show yourself." As the guards called out and quickened their pace, a pungent smell of burning assailed their noses. Their expressions changed abruptly. "Oh no, there's a fire." They looked up. The pile of sundries beside the warehouse was already blazing, and fanned by the night wind, the flames raced toward the warehouse building. "Help! The warehouse is on fire!" The guard's urgent shout shattered the quiet of the military compound deep in the night. The once silent compound was thrown into chaos. Footsteps, shouts, and the clattering of buckets rang out. Many people rushed out of their houses in nothing but hastily thrown on outer coats. The fire burned higher and higher, its crimson glow painting half the night sky red. Inside the warehouse, the two people who had been occupied with their private affairs froze completely at the sudden uproar outside. What's going on? Why is it so noisy out there?" Fu Qingyao's voice trembled with alarm. "It looks like there's a fire." Song Yang's face went pale. "Hurry, get dressed. If we are discovered, we are ruined." The two fumbled frantically with their clothes. The more flustered they grew, the more clumsy their movements became. At that very moment, the wooden warehouse door was kicked hard open. Firelight, flashlight beams, and dozens of pairs of eyes all streamed into the warehouse room. A crowd of compound residents had gathered in the doorway, and every gaze was fixed rigidly on the two disheveled figures inside. Seeing their rumpled clothing and flustered demeanor, no one present could fail to guess what had just been going on. When they recognized who the two were, the noisy crowd fell dead silent for a heartbeat. Then an explosion of murmurs burst forth. "Isn't that Jiang Meiwa's daughter Fu Qingyao? And that man beside her, isn't he Qingli's fiancé Song Yang? Good heavens! The fiancé and his prospective sister-in-law hiding together in the warehouse. What shameless behavior! They've brought shame on our entire military compound." The residents chattered among themselves, their voices rising and falling. Jiang Meiwa pushed her way through the crowd. Stung by the cutting comments all around her, her vision swam. When she saw the scene inside the warehouse, her legs nearly gave way beneath her. Damn it! How had this blown up into such a huge mess? How on earth was she going to fix this? Inside the warehouse, Fu Qingyao and Song Yang were ashen-faced. They wished the ground would split open and swallow them whole. When they heard people calling for them to be paraded through the streets in disgrace, terror overwhelmed them, and they slumped onto the cold floor. As they fell, Fu Qingyao's loosely fastened clothes slipped further askew. Seeing the marks on her skin, the onlookers spat in contempt. TCH, truly shameless. Song Yang quickly stepped in front of Fu Qingyao and roared, eyes red, "Don't look." "Everyone close your eyes." Someone in the crowd scoffed. "Who wants to look? We'd fear bad luck from seeing such a sight. Disgraceful pair." Hidden in the shadows, Fu Qingli watched the farce unfold, a cold, indifferent smile playing on her lips. This was only the beginning. Compared with all the schemes and suffering they had inflicted on the original host in her past life, this retribution was trivial. Every debt owed to the original host would be paid back, with interest. With that, she turned and left, fading soundlessly into the night just as she had come. Fu Qingli climbed back through her bedroom window, took off her night clothes, and lay back in bed as if nothing had happened. The commotion outside dragged on, refusing to die down. Fu Qingli slowly closed her eyes, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Just then, there was a soft knock at her door. Fu Qingli put on an act of having just woken up. She straightened her clothes, opened the door, and feigned confusion. "What is it? Why is it so noisy outside?" The guard looked at her with sympathy in his eyes. "Comrade Fu, you had better come out with the commander and see what has happened." "Very well." Fu Qingli followed Old Man Fu out into the compound, surrounded by the buzz of gossip. The old man's face was dark with fury. When they reached the warehouse entrance, he caught sight of the two disheveled, trembling people inside. "Fu Qingyao? Song Yang?" His voice was not loud, yet it carried immense weight. The surrounding chatter fell silent at once. Fu Qingyao shuddered violently and dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Grandpa, I didn't mean to." I just love Brother Songyang so much. Please, grant us your blessing. At that moment, Song Yang's parents rushed over, having heard the news. Old Man Fu took a deep breath and turned to the onlookers. I apologize to everyone. This is a private family matter that needs to be resolved. Please return to your homes. I will deal with this appropriately. Since the commander had spoken, no one dared linger to gawk. They left reluctantly, still whispering among themselves as they went. Old Man Fu's expression turned icy. Get properly dressed. Go home and we will discuss this there. With those words, he turned and walked back toward the residence with Fu Qingli. Once they were some distance away, he lowered his voice and probed cautiously. Granddaughter, did you arrange this? Fu Qingli glanced sideways at him. What? Grandpa, do you feel sorry for them? Old Man Fu shot her a sharp look. Feel sorry for them? I wish I could deal with them myself. Aren't you afraid this will damage the Fu family's reputation? Oomph. I am an old man with one foot in the grave. I care nothing for empty prestige. No one gets to make my granddaughter suffer and get away with it. You may act as you see fit. Do not endure wrongs from anyone who displeases you. Your grandpa stands behind you. What have you to fear? Fu Qingli looked at the stern-faced old man beside her, and her lips curved softly. I knew you would stand on my side. Seeing how furious you looked just now, I truly thought you were enraged. Old Man Fu lifted an eyebrow with quiet pride. Well? Was my acting convincing? Fu Qingli gave him a thumbs up. Extremely so. Pleased by the compliment, the old man huffed in mock disdain. Naturally. Remember who your grandfather is. Soon they were back home. Old Man Fu sat down in the main seat, his features hardening instantly. Fu Qingli secretly gave him another thumbs up. He shot her a look to tell her not to misbehave. Meanwhile, Song Yang's parents stared darkly at their son and Fu Qingao, who had now put their clothes back on. Before long, everyone had gathered at Old Man Fu's house. Fu Qingao and Song Yang, now decently dressed, knelt once more before him. Song Yang's father drew a deep breath. Commander, name your punishment. I will disown this unworthy son. Old Man Fu gave him a cold stare. Punish him? How can punishment fix this scandal? The Fu family's good name has been tarnished. His gaze swept like a blade over the trembling pair on their knees, his voice icy. The honor of the Fu family is not to be desecrated like this. Song Yang, you were meant to be my granddaughter's fiancé. After this dishonorable conduct, the engagement is annulled. Song Yang lifted his head sharply. Commander, I... Silence. Old Man Fu thundered. You have no right to speak in my presence. He turned to Fu Qingyao, no trace of mercy in his eyes. You were supposed to be the second young lady of the Fu household, yet you have acted shamelessly and brought disgrace on our family. From today onward, you are no longer part of the Fu family. Without my permission, you are never to set foot on Fu property again. Fu Qingao stared at him in disbelief. Grandpa, I beg you. I was wrong, truly wrong. She could not lose her status as the second young lady of the Fu family. Without it, she would be utterly ruined. She knelt and kowtowed repeatedly. Grandpa, please. I know my mistake. Quiet. Old Man Fu snapped. Do not call me Grandpa. I am not your grandfather. At that point, Jiang Meiwa could hold back no longer. She dropped to her knees before Old Man Fu. Sir, I beg you. For all these years I have run this household faithfully, spare Yao. She cannot be cast out. Old Man Fu looked at her coldly. Faithful? You do not deserve that word. Were it not for you, the Fu family would not be in this state. You will leave the Fu house, effective immediately. At those words, Jiang Meiwa's face blanched, and she swayed unsteadily on her feet. Song Yang's parents regarded her with contempt, then shot an angry glare at their own son. Foolish boy. He had cast aside a pearl to chase something worthless. Then Fu Aigua's voice came from outside. Father, what is going on here? He had heard the full story. He could scarcely believe that the always gentle-seeming Yao Yao had done such a thing. But it had happened, and he had to do something. Fu Aigua looked at his tear-stained wife and Fu Qingao and sighed. Father, I know Yao Yao has done wrong. But it takes two. Yao Yao and Song Yang truly love each other. Free love is encouraged these days. That childhood engagement was nothing more than a drunken agreement between you and General Song, with no real binding force. Why not grant them your blessing? Old Man Fu flew into a rage. You fool. Listen to what you are saying. Your stepdaughter stole your own biological daughter's fiancé, and you want me to bless them. Fu Aigua pressed his lips together. Father. If we handle this any other way, how will the Fu and Song families hold up our heads in this compound? Old man Fu knew there was truth in that, yet he could not swallow his anger. Besides, Fu Aigua went on, when you and General Song made that childhood pledge, you never specified which daughter it was to be. Yao Yao is also your daughter's sister. There is no reason they cannot be together. Old man Fu's hands shook with anger. Can you hear the nonsense coming out of your mouth? Father, said Fu Aigua, since Meiwa married me, her daughter is my daughter too. Jiang Meiwa's eyes filled with tears. Aigua. Fu Aigua ignored her and turned to Song Yang's father. Song Guowei. If you agree to a marriage between Yao Yao and Song Yang, this matter can be settled. We will simply tell others that they had long been intended for each other, and that they lost control of their feelings for a moment. Song Guowei glanced at old man Fu, whose face was dark and unyielding. He quickly nodded. Yes, of course. Very well, Fu Aigua said. That settles it. He waved a hand. You may go home and prepare for the wedding. Thank you, thank you. Song Yang's father replied hastily. We will set about preparations at once. With that, he left with Song Yang and his wife. The moment they stepped out of the room, Fu Aigua sank to his knees. Old man Fu narrowed his eyes and said nothing. Fu Aigua bowed his head and knocked his forehead hard against the floor. Father, I have wronged you. I have wronged Qingli and I have wronged her mother. Today I will move out with Mei Hua and Yao Yao. Old man Fu looked down at him. The one you have wronged is not me. It is your daughter Qingli. Fu Aigua lifted his gaze toward Fu Qingli. Qingli, I hear you have changed your given name to Qingli. It suits you well. I know I have failed you and your mother. Please believe me, I will make amends to you in time. He stood and grabbed Jiang Meiwa's arm. Pack your things. We are moving out. At the thought of leaving the military compound, Jiang Meiwa cried out. No. Fu Aigua gave her a cold stare. Either move out or we divorce. Choose. Jiang Meiwa bit her lip as tears rolled down her cheeks. I will move. She pulled Fu Qingao along. Come, let us pack. Old man Fu watched them gather their luggage and made no move to stop them. He turned to Fu Qingli. Granddaughter, you must be tired. Go get some rest. Fu Qingli nodded. All right, Grandpa. Please rest early too. Old man Fu gave a soft nod. Fu Qingli returned to her room and slept soundly through the night. When she woke the next morning, Jiang Meiwa and the others were gone. Old man Fu sat at the breakfast table reading a newspaper. When he saw Fu Qingli come out, he waved her over. Granddaughter, come quickly. Steamed buns, still hot from the steamer. Thank you, Grandpa. They finished breakfast together. Fu Qingli went out for a walk. She listened to the gossip swirling through the compound and met many gazes full of sympathy directed at her. The corners of her mouth tugged upward. Fu Qingyao, in this new life, you will no longer be the admired favorite of everyone. Time slipped by, and soon the day arrived for Fu Qingli to leave for the countryside. Long before dawn, a vehicle quietly pulled out from deep within the Beijing military compound. There were no horns blaring, no grand send-off. Only a military jeep carried Fu Qingli and her grandfather, Commander Fu. The old man wore a well-worn military uniform with crisp shoulder boards. His back was still as straight as a gun barrel, yet in his usually steady eyes lay heavy sorrow. He was, after all, a military region commander, capable of defending vast stretches of territory, yet powerless to protect his granddaughter whom he had raised. His daughter-in-law, the stepmother, had pulled strings behind the scenes. Her name had been forcibly added to the list for the rural re-education program. All formal procedures had been completed openly and properly, and with the mandatory policy sending urban youth to the countryside in full swing, even a commander like him could not openly block the arrangement. He could only watch helplessly as his granddaughter, once a pampered young lady of the military compound, was sent thousands of miles away to the frigid Black Soil province in northeast China. The thought filled him with rage. He wished he could strangle Fu Aigua, that worthless man. He wondered if Fu Aigua had left his wits behind when he was born. Soon the car pulled up at the Beijing railway platform, and piercing cold wind swept over them. Fu Qingli wore a blue outfit with a military overcoat on top, holding a mesh bag issued to educated youth. Old Master Fu said nothing. He reached out and tightened her scarf for her. His fingertips were rough, covered in calluses from years of holding guns, yet his movements were gentle, as though even a little extra force might break her. Grandpa, Fu Qingli's throat tightened. She could feel the genuine affection the old man held for the original host of this body, and the more she felt it, the more conflicted her heart became. I have wronged you, the old man said in a low voice, barely concealing a trace of sorrow. Then old Master Fu pressed a leather envelope into Fu Qingli's palm. Inside are money and national grain coupons. Take them. Remember who you are. Do not fear once you reach the Black Soil province in the northeast. Your grandfather is here for you, no matter what happens. Fu Qingli's fingers paused. She looked up at old Master Fu with calm, determined eyes. Grandpa, rest assured. I can take good care of myself. Please take the money and grain coupons back. You have already given me more than enough. Silly child, take it. Only if you accept them can I set my mind at ease. Just then, the train whistle blared sharply. Fu Qingli knew that if she kept refusing, the old man would never stop worrying. Reluctantly, she took the envelope. Old Master Fu nodded faintly as he watched her tuck the envelope inside her close-fitting shoulder bag. In that brief moment, Fu Qingli had secretly stored the envelope inside her spatial storage. Grandpa, please take good care of yourself. With those words, she turned and boarded the train amid the surging crowd. Through the window, Fu Qingli saw the old man still standing on the platform, and she waved. Grandpa, go back now. Old Master Fu waved back at her. Then Fu Qingli spotted Fu Aigua standing some distance away, watching her. She had not expected Fu Aigua to come see her off, so she waved toward him as well. Seeing this, Fu Aigua's eyes reddened slightly, and he waved back. He had thought Qingli would never acknowledge him again. Fu Qingli thought to herself, I need to leave him with some impression. Otherwise he might refuse to send me my share of his salary later. She would never let Jiang Mei Hua and her daughter benefit from it. Old Master Fu also caught sight of Fu Aigua and spoke in a cold tone. You actually dared to show up? I thought you would hide and refuse to appear. Father. Enough, do not call me your father. Remember to send half of your monthly salary to Nanan. Having said that, old Master Fu turned and left the platform. The train clattered its way north. The scenery outside the window gradually shifted from bustling prosperity to bleak desolation. Fu Qingli carried her luggage, found her compartment, settled her belongings, and sat down on the lower bunk. This four-person sleeper compartment was neat and clean, bearing traces of age. She had no idea who else would enter it. In the previous life, the original host had never ridden in a sleeper car at all. Lost in these thoughts, she watched three young women carry large bundles into the compartment. One girl looked utterly worn out and sighed. Goodness, I am exhausted. I need to sit down for a while. No sooner had she spoken than she sat down on the opposite bunk. Noticing Fu Qingli was already there, she blinked, thinking to herself how beautiful and fair-skinned this girl was. She gave Fu Qingli a small nod. The other two young women hurried to sort their luggage. After a long time, they finished organizing their belongings and climbed up to their bunks. The compartment fell quiet. The green train trundled onward. The girl on the lower bunk turned to Fu Qingli and smiled, striking up a conversation. Hello, my name is Bai Wei. I am being sent to Hongwei Brigade, Red Star Commune in Harbin, Black Soil Province. Where are you assigned? Fu Qingli looked up at her and said slowly, My name is Fu Qingli. I am going to Kaoshan Brigade, Red Flag Commune in Harbin, Black Soil Province. Bai Wei let out a soft oh, her voice tinged with regret. I hoped we would be sent to the same place. She tilted her head and called toward the two girls on the upper bunks. Comrades, where are the two of you going for rural re-education? The two female, educated youth on the upper bunks quickly replied. We are also going to Hongwei Brigade, Red Star Commune. Bai Wei's eyes lit up with joy. Wonderful. We are heading to the same place. We must look out for each other once we arrive in the countryside. The other two girls nodded with smiles, and they soon chatted animatedly. Fu Qingli sat to one side, not joining in, merely listening quietly. Cold wind howled outside the windows, which were coated with thick frost. Memories of her past life surfaced in her mind, scenes of fighting side by side with her comrades. A faint smile tugged at her lips. She wondered how her partners had fared after her sudden death, whether they had grieved for her. Lost in thought, she leaned against the bunk and drifted off to sleep. In her dream, she saw the tombstone her partners had erected for her, saw their heavy, sorrowful faces. She wanted to comfort them. From the moment she had joined the special unit, she had been prepared to sacrifice her life. She wanted to tell them not to grieve too deeply. Yet no matter how she waved and called out, none of them could see her. Just as she was about to give up, she saw her old rival Louis Chuan walk over. He set a bouquet of fresh flowers gently before her tombstone. Seeing Louis Chuan, Fu Qingli rolled her eyes inwardly. Had he come especially to mock her? Let him, she thought. She would no longer be there to witness it. But there was no trace of mockery on Lu Yichuan's face. Instead, a tear rolled down his cheek. Fu Qingli froze in disbelief. How could that be? He was the captain of Dragon Group. How could he shed tears? She must have misseen it. She stepped forward for a clearer look when someone gave her a hard shove. Fu Qingli jolted awake. She frowned as she took in her surroundings and looked at the person who had woken her. What do you want? An elderly woman looked embarrassed. Young lady, I am truly sorry. Could you swap seats with me? My old body cannot stand hard seat travel. Would you do me this kindness? Fu Qingli stared at the old woman, who wanted to trade her hard seat ticket for this sleeper berth, and frowned. Do I look like someone you can take advantage of? The old woman's expression soured. What kind of talk is that? It is just a simple seat swap. Are you so young yet unwilling to endure a little hardship? Fu Qingli retorted, I have no interest in enduring hardship for no reason. I am not your family. Leave me alone. The old woman flew into a rage. How dare you speak to me like this? Help! This young person is bullying an old woman. Her loud cry drew a crowd of onlookers to the compartment. Fu Qingli shot her a cold glance. She was no saint. Power stirred faintly in her palms. She had no intention of tolerating this entitled old woman. She was about to act when a train conductor hurried over. Seeing the commotion, he asked, What is going on here? At the sight of the conductor, Fu Qingli suppressed her power and gave the shouting old woman a frigid look. The old woman was lucky. If she had unleashed her power, it would not have killed her, but it would have left her in terrible agony. She thought that the conductor had arrived at just the right moment and recounted exactly what had happened. After hearing the full story, the conductor frowned at the old woman. Madam, please show me your ticket. At the demand for her ticket, the old woman forgot her shouting and tried to slip away, but the conductor grabbed her. Show me your ticket, or I will call the railway police. Reluctantly, the old woman pulled a crumpled ticket from her pocket. The conductor glanced at it and frowned more deeply. Your stop has long passed, and this is only a standing ticket. Why have you not gotten off? When the old woman stayed silent, the conductor said sternly, either buy a supplementary ticket now or get off at the next station. Having no other choice, the old woman shot Fu Qingli a venomous glare and unwillingly paid for her supplementary ticket. The conductor handed her the new ticket. This is a standing ticket. You cannot remain in the sleeper compartment. Please come with me. He led the old woman away, and the disturbance subsided. Fu Qingli rubbed her temples irritably, walked to the door, and bolted it shut. Bai Wei saw her bad mood and said nothing. That same old woman had approached Bai Wei earlier, and Bai Wei had ignored her. Night fell. The others in the compartment pulled food from their bags. Fu Qingli had little appetite and ate only a few bites of a steamed bun. She stared out the window at the passing scenery, her mind drifting back to that strange dream. After some time, the girls on the opposite and upper bunks had fallen asleep. She lay down, closed her eyes to rest, and eventually drifted off. When she woke again, dawn had broken. Relief washed over her as she watched the pale light outside. In a few short hours, she would reach her destination. The train rumbled into a station and came to a halt. Wanting some fresh air, Fu Qingli stepped off with the crowd. The platform was packed and noisy. Porters carrying shoulder poles, people clutching mesh bags, and travelers hurrying about created total chaos. Barely had she steadied herself when a middle-aged woman in coarse cloth clothing rushed toward her, seized her wrist tightly, and began wailing loudly. Second daughter, I have finally found you. Come home with me. I will never stand in the way of your relationship with Damao again. At those words, 4 or 5 people closed in, boxing her in completely. Passers-by stopped to watch the spectacle. The more onlookers gathered, the louder the woman cried, beating her thighs as she lamented. Ungrateful girl. You ran away without a word and stole all the money we had in the house. Your little brother and sister are starving at home. How are we supposed to survive? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She looks neat and clean, yet she stole money and ran away from home. What a thoughtless girl. She must have broken her parents' hearts. No wonder her mother searched everywhere for her. Anyone would be distraught. Whispers spread, and people stared at Fu Qingli with accusatory eyes. The accomplices exchanged glances and joined in, pretending to be indignant. You are behaving terribly. Your parents raised you with so much hardship, and you run off and steal money. How can you live with yourself? Go home with your mother at once. Stop disgracing yourself out here. They framed the whole incident as a domestic quarrel, speaking in vague terms so that no one would suspect human trafficking. The woman continued to wail and tug hard at Fu Qingli's arm, trying to drag her away by force. Fu Qingli's eyes turned ice cold. She understood instantly. This was no family reunion. This gang were human traffickers. Recalling what had happened to the original host in her past life, a flicker of killing intent flashed across her gaze. She twisted her wrist free and wrenched the woman's arm behind her back in one sharp, fluid motion. It hurts. Let go. You have gone mad. The woman's face contorted in agony as she screamed. The accomplices grew frantic. How dare you treat your own mother like this? Release her at once, or we will not hold back. One middle-aged man's eyes turned vicious. He quietly pulled a wooden club from behind his back. Amid the chaos of the crowd, he swung it hard toward Fu Qingli's head, shouting as if in righteous anger. Ungrateful girl. Today I will teach you a lesson for your parents. Fu Qingli did not flinch. She dodged the blow nimbly, then kicked hard, sending the man flying. He crashed heavily onto the ground and coughed up blood. The onlookers frowned at how forcefully she had struck. Just then, railway police officers hurried over. What is happening here? Fu Qingli looked at them and spoke steadily. These people are human traffickers. Please arrest them. The man who had coughed up blood glared with rage and shouted back. You lie. I am your maternal uncle. You dare falsely accuse us of human trafficking. The woman resumed her hysterical weeping. Second daughter, what nonsense are you saying? I am your own mother. How can you slander us? She pointed to the injured man through her tears. And that is your uncle. How could you hurt him so badly? Fu Qingli watched her persist in her lies and said coldly, You claim to be my mother. Tell me, what is my name? The woman's eyes darted. Your Song area, my second daughter. You ran away because I opposed your relationship with Da Mao, and you stole our household money. She wiped her tears, putting on a wronged expression. Her accomplices quickly echoed her. Yes, exactly what happened. The police officer looked at the calm-faced Fu Qingli, then at the weeping woman and her group, whose story sounded convincing. He could not immediately tell who was telling the truth. He refused to take sides. Calm down. If you are mother and daughter, show us documents proving your relation. The woman panicked and stammered. We left home in a hurry and forgot our papers. We are simple country folk. We do not carry such things around. The man backed her up. Comrade officer, the girl is angry with her family and is making false claims. Do not be fooled. Fu Qingli let out a cold laugh and stepped forward, her sharp gaze sweeping over them. You say I am Song area. How old am I? How many people are in my family? What is my father's name? On what day was my mother born? Bombarded with these questions, the woman's face blanched. Her lips trembled and she could not form a coherent reply. Her eyes darted about in panic. Fu Qingli turned to the police. They cannot answer basic facts about me, yet insist I am Song area. They have rehearsed this story to kidnap me. They moved with practiced skill when they tried to drag me away. They are clearly repeat offenders. Convinced, the police officer looked at the other accomplices. Can any of you answer questions about her? They stared at one another, none of them able to speak. The officer gestured to his colleagues. Secure all of them. Take them back to the station for thorough questioning. The woman began to scream and throw a tantrum, but the officers restrained her. The rest tried to resist and were quickly subdued. As they were led away, the middle-aged man shot Fu Qingli a hateful glare. They had targeted her because she was well-dressed, never expecting to meet such a tough opponent. Fu Qingli exhaled in relief and nodded toward the officers. Thank you, comrades. I am Fu Qingli, an educated youth being sent to Kaoshan Brigade, Red Flag Commune in Ha County, Black Soil Province. Thank you for your help. She pulled out her letter of introduction and rural re-education permit. These are my documents. The police officer glanced over them and warned, be more careful in future. Come with us to the police station to make a formal statement. But the train departs in 20 minutes, Fu Qingli said. The police station is right beside the station. The statement will not take long. You will have plenty of time. Very well, Fu Qingli agreed. She finished giving her statement and hurried back to the platform, boarding the train with only 5 minutes left before departure. Back in the compartment, she pushed the incident from her mind. Not far away, Ji Dongxiang watched Fu Qingli safely return to the train and walked back to his own carriage. He had seen the man swing the club. He had intended to step in, but the crowd blocked his path. He had been about to shout a warning when Fu Qingli had already handled the situation herself, so he had held back. Bai Wei and the others had woken up and were chatting. They greeted Fu Qingli when she returned and went back to their conversation. Soon afterward, the train arrived at its destination. Fu Qingli picked up her luggage and exited with the crowd. Biting cold wind hit her the moment she stepped off the train. She thought to herself that it was already March, yet Ha County in the northeast was still freezing. Thankfully, her grandfather had given her the heavy overcoat. Bai Wei and the others huddled against the chill and muttered about how cold it was. They walked toward the exit, where representatives from different communes and brigades held wooden signs, calling out to collect the newly arrived educated youth. Fu Qingli spotted the sign for Kaohsiung Brigade, Red Flag Commune. She said goodbye to the other girls and walked over with her bags. Holding up a sign, Meng Hongbing turned his head and asked the middle-aged man beside him, "Captain, how many educated youths are we assigned this time?" Captain Liu sighed. 5. He worried inwardly. These city-bred youngsters hardly knew how to do farm work. If they went to work in the fields, one careless swing of a shovel could chop off rice seedlings, and the thought alone made his heart ache. Reluctant as he was, he had to accept the sent-down educated youths in response to the national call. Lost in thought, a pretty young woman walked up to him and pulled out her letter of introduction and sent-down youth notice. "Hello. My name is Fu Qingli. I am the educated youth assigned to Kaohsiung Production Brigade." The captain looked up at the young woman and sighed silently again. She was fair-skinned and beautiful, clearly a city girl who had never endured hardship. She would probably struggle with heavy field labor. Judging by her clothes, her family must be well off and likely sent her supplies regularly. Relying solely on work points earned in the fields, she would have a hard time getting by. He said, "I'm Liu He, captain of Kaohsiung Production Brigade. You may call me captain. This is Meng Hongbing, person in charge of the educated youth compound. He came specially to meet your group of new arrivals." Fu Qingli nodded slightly. "Greetings, captain." "Greetings, comrade Meng." Meng Hongbing smiled and replied, "Hello." Just then, 2 more young men and 2 young women walked over one after another. Seeing everyone had arrived, the captain called out each name to check their identities. Once confirmed, he led them over to the passenger bus. "All right, get on. Our brigade is 20 kilometers away from Ha County. The bus ride will take roughly 40 minutes. Hearing this, everyone picked up their luggage and boarded the bus one by one. Silence filled the carriage. All stared out the windows at the unfamiliar rural scenery without speaking. Before long, the bus reached its destination. The captain told everyone to get off. Old Man Liu, who had been waiting, hurried his ox cart forward. The captain walked over to Old Man Liu. "Thank you for coming, 7th uncle. It's cold out for you to make this trip." Old Man Liu drew his cotton, padded coat tighter, breathed on his hands, and rubbed them together. "It's no trouble. Hurry and get loaded up." The captain turned to the new arrivals. "Put your luggage on the ox cart. We're heading back to the brigade. It's not far. The walk will take a little over 20 minutes. Bai Tingting quickly heaped her luggage onto the cart and tried to sit down right away. Before she could settle in, the captain stopped her. "Comrade Bai, this ox cart is for luggage, not for people to ride. If everyone rides it, the ox will wear itself out. Who will do the farm work afterwards?" Bai Tingting's eyes widened in disbelief. "What do you mean? Are we supposed to walk all the way back?" The captain nodded. "That's right." Though unwilling, Bai Tingting had no choice but to climb down from the cart. The captain cracked his whip and guided the ox cart slowly toward the brigade. As Bai Tingting walked alongside, her eyes drifted secretly to the thick army greatcoat Fu Qingli wore. Not everyone could own an army greatcoat in these times. Clearly, this girl came from a privileged background. She stepped closer with a friendly smile. "Hello, comrade Fu, educated youth. My name is Bai Tingting." Fu Qingli glanced sideways at her and gave a short nod. Seeing the response, Bai Tingting's mouth tugged upward. Fu Qingli recalled what had happened with Bai Tingting in her previous life. In that lifetime, Bai Tingting had constantly taken advantage of the original host. When the original host's grandfather was still alive, she had not suffered much in the countryside. Every month, her grandfather mailed food tickets and daily necessities. Bai Tingting treated her as an easy target and kept leeching off her. Once the grandfather passed away and the parcels stopped coming, Bai Tingting's attitude shifted completely. Seeing there was no more benefit to gain, she began to frame and slander the original host, falsely labeling her a capitalist's daughter who exploited others. Because of these accusations, the original host nearly endured a public struggle session until the truth came out. The two fell out completely. When Bai Tingting learned the truth about the original host's family background, she was badly frightened. Afraid that Fu Qingli would return to the city and get revenge, Bai Tingting colluded with a local troublemaker to set a trap for her. Luckily, the original host saw through the plot. With the captain's protection, she escaped being forced into marriage with that man. Remembering all this, Fu Qingli narrowed her eyes. Since Bai Tingting was so drawn to that troublemaker, she would grant her wish in this life. She hoped Bai Tingting would be grateful. Before they knew it, the group reached Kaoshan Production Brigade. Villagers watched the new educated youths arrive. Some curled their lips in disdain, while others stared in admiration. Old Man Lu drove the ox cart straight to the far, west side of the village, to the educated youth compound set apart from the villagers' houses. Everyone unloaded their luggage. After exchanging a few words with the captain, Old Man Lu drove the ox cart away. Fu Qingli looked at the 2 rows of houses in the courtyard. One row stood on the east side, the other on the west, separated by roughly 5 meters. To her surprise, a well sat in the middle of the yard. Independent wells like this were rare in this era. She had worried about getting drinking water, and the problem was solved right away. Behind the houses rose rolling mountains. She raised an eyebrow. Living so close to the hills carried the risk of wild animals coming down. The captain quickened his pace as he spoke. Our compound is much better than those in other brigades. It was renovated only a few years ago. What he did not mention was why the renovation had happened. Heavy rains had once caused a house to collapse, nearly crushing an educated youth. After that incident, some better-off educated youths asked for private rooms and offered to pay for new construction. Once they left for the cities, the houses would belong to the brigade. After discussing it with the villagers, the captain had agreed. In future, educated youths sent down to the countryside could rent private rooms. The rent would bring extra income to the village, and that was how these separate rooms came to exist. He pointed behind the main buildings. We have both large shared dormitories and private rooms. Bunks in the shared quarters are still available. You may choose where to stay, but the private rooms cost rent. Hearing about private rooms, Fu Qingli's eyes lit up. Captain, are any private rooms vacant? I would like to rent one. There are some left. Rent is 1 yuan and 50 fin per month. You must gather your own firewood for winter. If you do not want to go up the mountain to collect it, you may trade goods with villagers for firewood. Very well. I will apply for 1 private room. The other 4 educated youths envied Fu Qingli. They also wanted private rooms, but their families supported siblings back home. They could not spare 1 yuan and 50 fin for rent, so they had to give up the idea. Bai Tingting glanced at Fu Qingli, her eyes flickering, then lowered her head, lost in thought. Soon they reached the dormitory buildings. The captain gestured toward the 2 rows of houses. The east row is for female educated youths, the west for males. The back row holds all the private rooms, and several are empty. Those choosing shared bunks can move their luggage inside now. He then led Fu Qingli to the back row. 3 rooms are free right now. Pick whichever you like. The 2 on the east side are already occupied. Fu Qingli looked them over. Each room stood some distance apart. The farthest, west room was isolated from the others. She chose that one. It lay close to the foot of the mountain, far from the main dorm buildings, quiet and undisturbed. I will take this one, Captain. Captain Lu nodded. All right, this is a good room. The previous occupant left some things inside. You may use them if you do not mind. Come with me to the brigade office to finish the paperwork and collect your key. All right. Fu Qingli followed him to the brigade office. In a short while the formalities were done, rent paid, and she walked back with her key. Villagers stared and whispered as she passed. That girl is so pretty, like a fairy. Some women, jealous of her looks, rolled their eyes. She looks delicate. She will probably not be able to handle farm work and end up relying on the village for help. Others agreed. Seeing how frail-looking she was, local men who had once thought of courting her dropped the idea. Fu Qingli ignored the gossip. She did not want trouble on her first day here, but she would not tolerate being bullied. Back at the compound, she unlocked her door. Inside, the small adobe room was reasonably tidy, around 10 square meters in total. Against the inner wall sat a single brick Kong roughly 1.2 meters wide, covered with yellowed reed mats worn smooth at the edges. Beside the Kong stood an old wooden table, a bench, and a simple wooden cabinet in the corner. To her delight, a small separate kitchen area had been built with adobe bricks. Though tiny, it was very practical. The kitchen stove connected to the Kang. Cooking meals would heat the Kang at the same time. All she needed was a small pot for the stove. It was a pleasant surprise. She set her luggage on the Kang, fetched an iron basin and towel, drew water from the well, and cleaned every corner of the room. Once finished, she stowed her belongings in the cabinet. Since it was not the busy farming season, the captain had given the new arrivals 3 days of leave. The Kang felt ice cold. Fu Qingli knew she had to make a fire tonight or she would not sleep. Though she could retreat into her spatial dimension, never lighting the stove for days in a row would arouse suspicion. After tidying up, she stepped out to collect firewood from the back mountain. Outside, she ran into several female, educated youths carrying bundles of belongings. Su Hui's eyes lit up when she saw Fu Qingli's striking appearance. She stepped forward. "You must be the new educated youth. You got here fast." She introduced herself with a smile. "My name is Su Hui. I come from Ha County. I am the person in charge for the female dormitory." Su Hui was drawn to good-looking people and was naturally warm toward Fu Qingli. Fu Qingli nodded politely. "Hello. My name is Fu Qingli. I am from Jing City." "What a beautiful name," Su Hui said sincerely. The young women beside her began introducing themselves. Fu Qingli already knew all of them from the original host's memories. In her previous life, Su Hui had often helped the original host and warned her to keep her distance from Bai Tingting. Unfortunately, the original host had snapped at Su Hui instead. Afterwards, Su Hui minded her own business and no longer interfered. Next, a tall, well-featured young woman beside Su Hui spoke. "Hello. My name is Tian Xiaomai. Nice to meet you. I am from Ha County." Fu Qingli nodded. "Hello." She had had very little contact with Tian Xiaomai in the past. Another tall young woman smiled. "I'm Chao Xin. Also from Ha County." Fu Qingli gave her a slight nod. Then the male educated youths introduced themselves. "Hello. My name is Guo Chong. I'm from Ha County." Beside him, an honest-looking young man said, "My name is Zhao Fujuan. I'm from Ha County." Fu Qingli was not surprised. Most of these educated youths came from nearby Ha County. When they missed home, they could ask the captain for leave to visit during slack seasons. Very few people came all the way from Jing City like her. Su Hui spoke again. "These are most of us staying in the compound. 2 others have gone back to town to visit family. It is unclear whether they will return." She slapped her forehead. "And Meng Hongbing, who met you today. He is in charge of the male dorm. You have already met him." Fu Qingli nodded. "Yes, I have." Hearing voices, Bai Tingting and the other new arrivals stepped out of their rooms. Bai Tingting spoke to the group. "Hello everyone. My name is Bai Tingting. I'm from Jin City." The young woman beside her followed. "Hello. My name is Gao Nana. I'm from Liao Province." The 2 young men also introduced themselves. "Hello. My name is Wang Yu. I'm from Jin City." "Hello. My name is Zhang Liang. I'm from Liao Province. It's a pleasure to meet you all." After everyone exchanged greetings, Su Hui turned to Fu Qingli. "Comrade Fu, where are you off to?" "I'm going to collect firewood from the back mountain. I rented a private room and need to heat the Kang." Su Hui was surprised that Fu Qingli had taken a private room right away. "You don't need to rush up the mountain. Rest today. There is stockpiled firewood you can use tonight. You can gather more tomorrow. We have prepared a simple meal to welcome you new arrivals." Fu Qingli accepted the offer. "Very well. I will repay you with firewood tomorrow." Su Hui laughed. She appreciated that this beautiful young woman did not take advantage of others. The older, educated youths went to the kitchen to cook. Soon food was served: coarse grain steamed buns, sweet potatoes, turnip, tofu soup, and stir-fried shredded potatoes. Su Hui, Tian Xiaomai and Xiao Xin set out tables and stools and called everyone to eat. The meal was lively, and everyone grew more familiar with one another. After dinner, people returned to their rooms. Fu Qingli carried firewood back to her private room and soon got the Kang nice and warm. She took a quilt out of her spatial dimension and spread it over the Kang. She bolted her door, stepped into her space, and walked to the bamboo storehouse where her supplies were kept. 5 small iron woks, 5 coal stoves, 5 kitchen knives, shovels, bowls, and chopsticks lay on the ground. She held one small wok up to imagine its position. It would fit perfectly on her indoor stove. She decided she would go to the county supply and marketing cooperative tomorrow. These supplies could not be displayed openly without a reasonable explanation. She also needed to go to the commune grain station to collect her grain ration. Newly sent, down-educated youths received state-supplied grain for their first year and collected rations once a month from the grain station, instead of waiting for brigade harvest distributions. A mix of coarse and fine grain kept one person fed. Even though she had ample supplies in her space, she still had to collect the official ration. Grain distributed by the brigade would come later, tied to work points earned through labor, after the autumn harvest or the following year. If she worked diligently, she would have enough to eat. Some better off educated youths chose light jobs that earned fewer work points. With money and tickets, they bought grain privately from villagers instead. Having sorted out her plans, Fu Qingli went over to the spiritual spring pool and sat down to cultivate her abilities. Early the next morning, just before dawn, Fu Qingli woke up. A faint smile tugged at her lips as she sensed her special powers. She stepped out of her spatial dimension and touched the king. It still held warmth. The small room was comfortably warm. She tidied herself, tucked away her money and coupons, locked the door, and set off for the commune. Kaoshan Production Brigade was not far from the county seat. Walking took a little more than half an hour. An ox cart could cut it down to roughly 25 minutes, but only when the brigade went into town on business during slack seasons. Oxen were precious resources and could not be used for casual rides. A bicycle would be fastest, taking only about 10 minutes. Fu Qingli thought about the bicycle stored in her space. She would have to find a plausible excuse to bring it out someday. But not right away. Showing up with a bicycle the moment she arrived would draw too much attention. On the road, she passed commune members heading out for work. They stared curiously at the pretty new educated youth. Among them were several men with malicious gazes. One belonged to the local troublemaker Erlizzi. Fu Qingli raised her brows and decided to teach him a lesson. She sent a wisp of fire-based ability into Erlizzi's body. He felt a sudden surge of heat, which faded immediately. Thinking it was just his imagination, he went off to work. She sent faint traces of the same power toward the others who had looked at her with ill intent. The power would not harm them seriously, but would cause them sharp pain for half an hour, leaving no trace doctors could find. Having finished unseen, she kept walking. A dozen meters later, wails of pain echoed from behind her. "Ah, it hurts. Help." Second Lai Zi and several other men shouted at that moment. "Help. Something's burning my body. Help." The men began scratching themselves frantically. The commune members walking alongside them frowned at the sight. "You lot are trying to slack off again. Honestly, you couldn't come up with a better excuse. Something burning your bodies? Puh." The group ignored the men rolling on the ground and headed off to work. Hearing the commune members' words, Fu Qingli curled her lips and quickened her pace. She soon arrived at the county commune grain station. Fu Qingli gave her name and her production brigade, quickly completed the formalities, and collected her monthly grain ration. Most of it was cornmeal mixed with some sorghum, rice, and millet. There were only a few gene of wheat flour. Everything was packed in coarse cloth sacks, heavy in her hands. Fu Qingli thanked the staff, carried the grain, and did not linger. She found a secluded spot, stored the grain inside her space, then headed to the supply and marketing cooperative. Behind the glass counter were coarse porcelain bowls, iron basins, matches, soap, rough cloth, and scattered candies and pastries. Every item required ration coupons. She kept a low profile and only bought daily necessities: one coarse porcelain bowl, a small bar of soap, 2 boxes of matches, and 1.5 chi of rough cloth. After that, she went to the post office to collect her documents. The postman glanced at her and dragged 2 large parcels out from behind the counter. Fu Qingli took the parcels and thanked him. Stepping out of the post office, she found another empty spot and put both large parcels into her space before strolling slowly back. When she drew near the educated youth quarters, she sought out another quiet place and took the grain and parcels out of her space, carrying them toward her lodging. She had just reached the door when Su Hui came out. Spotting her loaded down with packages, she hurried over to take one large parcel. "You've got so many things. Why didn't you ask me to help carry them?" Fu Qingli smiled. "It's all right. I didn't expect there to be this much. It isn't too heavy." Su Hui hefted the parcel in her hands. "It's manageable. Next time you have this much to carry, make sure you call me." "All right, thank you, Comrade Su. No need to be so polite. We're all educated youths sent down to the countryside. Helping each other is only natural." By the way, did you go to the commune to collect your grain today? Fu Qingli nodded. I did. I plan to cook for myself. Su Hui understood. That's not a bad idea. More peace and quiet. The two soon reached Fu Qingli's small room. Su Hui set the things down on the ground. I'll leave these here for you. I'm heading back now. Thank you for your help, Comrade Su. You're welcome. Watching Su Hui walk away, Fu Qingli moved the belongings to the doorway, took out her key and unlocked the door. Then carried everything inside and sorted them neatly. These ordinary items were left out in sight for others to see. Anything valuable she had already stored safely inside her space, never to be left out where anyone could spot them. She retrieved a small iron wok, a metal spatula, a ladle, a small jar of lard, a set of chopsticks and bowls, and 2 plates from her space. Looking at her neatly arranged makeshift stove, Fu Qingli snapped her fingers softly. Perfect. She unwrapped the 2 parcels sent by her grandfather. One contained cotton, padded clothes, a quilt, cotton shoes, and several pairs of socks. Although the parcel looked large, it was not heavy at all. The bedding simply took up space. The other parcel was filled with food: 2 bottles of malted milk, 2 cans of meat, 2 cans of luncheon meat, 2 bags of full cream milk powder, a packet of White Rabbit creamy candy, a small bottle of honey, a bundle of dried noodles, 1 jean of brown sugar, and 1 jean of white sugar wrapped in craft paper, several peach cakes wrapped in oiled paper, plus a sack of wheat flour and a sack of rice, each weighing roughly 5 jean. Looking at all these supplies, Fu Qingli sighed. Her grandfather truly doted on his granddaughter. She would definitely honor him properly on behalf of the original owner of this body. She put all the precious foodstuffs and the new cotton quilt into her space, locked the door, and left the educated youth quarters to gather firewood up the mountain. Meanwhile, Bai Tingting woke up and rubbed her temples. She turned to Gao Nana beside her. Aren't we going to the commune grain station to collect our grain today? Gao Nana nodded. Yes. Let's hurry and ask Comrade Fu to come with us. The two quickly washed up and knocked on Fu Qingli's door, only to find it locked and the room empty. Bai Tingting frowned. Where did Comrade Fu go so early in the morning? Gao Nana thought for a moment. She might have already gone by herself. Bai Tingting thought to herself that Fu Qingli was selfish for leaving without telling them. They had come to the countryside together as new educated youths. She ought to know how to unite with others. Gao Nana glanced at her. Come on. Perhaps Comrade Fu had some business and left ahead of time. Bai Tingting pouted. Let's go then. As they reached the road junction, they ran into 2 other male educated youths. The 4 set off toward the commune together. Back on the back mountain, Fu Qingli had just bundled 2 loads of firewood and was preparing to head home, when she heard frightened shouts in the distance, mixed with the wild boar's snarls. Her heart tightened. If she remembered correctly, around this time in her previous life, the village chief's son had led a group of young men up the mountain to hunt. They encountered a full-grown wild boar, leaving 3 dead and 5 injured. One quick-witted youth ran down the mountain to get help, but by the time the village chief arrived with the villagers, it was already too late. The incident caused a huge stir, and people from the commune came to investigate. The brigade leader was removed from his position because of it. The new brigade leader who took over was far less easygoing than Brigade Leader Liu. He was ruthless, and the elderly men being held in the cattle shed were repeatedly dragged out for struggle sessions. She could not let that happen. When the original owner had been at her lowest and most desperate, one of the elderly men in the cattle shed had secretly slipped her a steamed corn bun. For that single mouthful of life-saving food, she had to save those people. What was more, the 3 elderly men in the cattle shed were all invaluable talents to the nation. She could not allow the future brigade leader to destroy them. With this thought, Fu Qingli dropped her firewood bundles, gripped her firewood knife tightly, and rushed deeper into the mountain. Just then, a young man stumbled frantically down the slope. Seeing Fu Qingli heading uphill, he shouted urgently, "Don't go that way. There are wild boars ahead. I'm going down the mountain to fetch help." With that, he scrambled downhill as fast as he could. Fu Qingli paid him no heed. By the time he brought people back, everything would already be over. She hurried up the mountainside and caught sight of 2 large, fully grown wild boars. One of them lowered its head, its sharp tusks glinting coldly, charging straight for the brigade leader's young grandson. It was about to gore the child in the stomach. At this critical moment, Fu Qingli flicked her wrist and hurled her firewood knife. It sliced sharply into the wild boar's neck. The boar let out a shrill cry of pain, and blood gushed out instantly. Seizing this split, second opening, Fu Qingli lunged forward, grabbed the brigade leader's grandson, and rolled sideways on the ground, narrowly dodging the boar's fatal charge. The second wild boar saw its companion wounded, spun around, and charged straight at Fu Qingli with furious eyes. Fu Qingli's heart sank. She now understood why so many had lost their lives here in her past life. There were 2 wild boars instead of 1. Without hesitation, she snatched the spear from the brigade leader's son, leaped toward the charging boar, and drove the spear hard into its skull. Everyone watched Fu Qingli leap into the air. The spear pierced straight through the wild boar's head. The crowd froze in shock, unable to speak for a long time. Many subconsciously swallowed hard. Her skill was astonishing. They had all thought their lives would end that day. Then a firewood knife came flying through the air, embedding itself in a boar's neck. Right after that, this striking young woman appeared out of nowhere. She had not only saved the brigade leader's grandson, but all of them. Only then did Lu Daqiang, the brigade leader's son, snap out of his daze and rush to check his young son. Seeing the boy unharmed, overcome with fear and relief, he slapped the child firmly on the bottom. "Who told you to sneak up the mountain with us? Do you know how dangerous it was? You could have died. Do you understand?" The boy, nicknamed Juzi, was terrified by the shouting. He burst into loud tears. Seeing his son crying, Lu Daqiang felt a wave of relief. He held the boy, laughing and weeping at once. Thank goodness, he had not been scared senseless. He could still cry. The wild boar with the knife stuck in its neck watched its companion collapse. Driven mad by agony, it charged blindly back and forth. Villagers and young men fled in all directions, throwing the scene into chaos. Fu Qingli grabbed Lu Daqiang with one hand and shielded his son with the other, quickly pulling them back to safety. She stared at the rampaging boar and the panicked crowd, frowned, and called out sharply. "Everyone who can move, climb up the trees." If not for the elderly men in the cattle shed, she would not have bothered saving these people. The villagers had always been hostile toward educated youths. In past years, some educated youths who returned to the cities abandoned their spouses and children without a second thought. The more conscientious ones sent money and ration coupons back home occasionally. The heartless ones cut off all contact entirely. Still, many educated youths chose to stay for their children, giving up their chance to return to the cities. Some even arranged to bring their families to the city once they had the opportunity. Only a small number acted cruelly, yet the villagers tarred all educated youths with the same brush and never treated them well afterward. The villagers heard her shout and scrambled to climb the nearest trees. The wild boar spotted Fu Qingli, the one who had injured it and killed its mate. Its eyes turned bloodshot, and it charged toward her at full speed. Fu Qingli watched the boar rushing forward. She bent down to pick up another firewood knife, pushed off the ground, and charged to meet the beast, swinging the blade hard at its head. But the boar's hide was extremely thick and tough, and the old knife gave way with a sharp crack. The blow still stunned the wild boar, halting its advance for a moment. Fu Qingli took the chance to step forward and wrench the knife embedded in the boar's neck free. Blood sprayed outward. She twisted her body to dodge, yet several drops splattered onto her clothing, a stark, jarring red. When the brigade leader arrived with a large group of villagers, they were met with a terrifying sight. One wild boar lay motionless, a spear stuck deep in its skull. The second boar's neck gushed blood across the ground. Fu Qingli stood beside the beast, gripping her firewood knife. The brigade leader's Adam's apple bobbed. He marveled silently at her clean, decisive skill. The villagers who had once harbored improper thoughts about Fu Qingli trembled in terror, cold dread running down their spines. They dared only watch from far away, never daring to entertain any wrong ideas again. Second Lizzie in particular shook uncontrollably, his legs turning to jelly. This woman was terrifying. Thank goodness he had never provoked her. The bleeding wild boar twitched and thrashed on the ground a few more times before collapsing motionless. Everyone let out a collective breath of relief. Most of the young men had only minor injuries. Many parents wept with joy, looking at Fu Qingli with sincere gratitude for saving their loved ones. The terrified young men slid down from the trees, collapsing into their parents' arms and crying. "It was horrible, I thought I was going to die." Their sobs were filled with raw fear, stirring pity in everyone who heard them. Villagers who had planned to scold their sons for sneaking up the mountain could only sigh. "Will you dare sneak into the deep mountains to hunt again? Have you forgotten how the old hunter lost his life?" At the mention of the old hunter, everyone shuddered once more. Regaining his senses, Lu Daqiang dropped to his knees before Fu Qingli, his voice trembling. "Thank you, Comrade Fu. If not for you, Juzi would be dead today." Fu Qingli reached out and pulled him to his feet. "Please stand. There is no need for this. Juzi survived because he was lucky, and it was all a coincidence." But the young men who had lived through the danger knew it was far more than coincidence. Without Fu Qingli's timely arrival, every single one of them would have been killed or maimed. They would never forget this debt of gratitude. More than 20 young men stared at Fu Qingli with reddened eyes, engraving this kindness deep in their hearts. After they recounted the terrifying events to their families, the villagers paled with fright. The brigade leader looked at his shaking son and his pale-faced grandson, feeling dizzy. If deaths had occurred today, he would not only lose his position as brigade leader, but also face severe punishment. He steadied himself and solemnly bowed to Fu Qingli. "Comrade Fu, words cannot express my gratitude." Other parents crowded around her, offering endless thanks. "Comrade Fu, we owe everything to you. You saved our whole family. We will remember this kindness for the rest of our lives." Fu Qingli felt uncomfortable amid the flood of thanks. "I still have things to attend to. I will head back now." With that, she turned and walked quickly down the mountain. Watching her retreating figure, the brigade leader said gravely, "We cannot forget Comrade Fu's great kindness. If Comrade Fu ever needs help in the future, everyone must lend a hand." The villagers nodded in agreement. The brigade leader then turned his gaze to the 2 wild boars on the ground. The larger one weighed no less than 400 or 500 jin, and the smaller one was close to 400 jin. He glanced at the shaken young men and his expression darkened. "No one is permitted to enter the deep mountains from now on. Think about what would have happened today without Comrade Fu." He turned to his son Lu Daqiang. "Do not think your strength lets you act recklessly. Without Comrade Fu, Juzi would have perished, and none of you would have returned alive." Lu Daqiang hung his head, overcome with guilt. "Father, I know I was wrong. It will never happen again. Remember this lesson." The brigade leader swept his gaze over the other young men. They nodded hastily. They had truly been terrified, and no amount of persuasion would drive them into the deep mountains ever again. Seeing how thoroughly frightened the boys were, the villagers chose not to scold them further. "Brigade leader, they only acted foolishly in the heat of the moment. We will keep a closer eye on them from now on. Everyone is safe, and that matters most." "That's right. We are incredibly lucky to have Comrade Fu, otherwise we would have faced a catastrophe." The brigade leader nodded grimly and stopped reprimanding them. He issued orders. "Men, carry these 2 wild boars back to the village and take them to the threshing ground to be butchered." Today's disaster was averted only thanks to Comrade Fu risking her life. "We will distribute the pork differently than usual. Comrade Fu must receive her share first, and no one is allowed to complain." Everyone voiced their assent. Strong men stepped forward, tied up the boars, and carried them downhill with heavy grunts. Blood dripped along the path as the massive boars were transported, drawing stares and murmurs from villagers they passed. Word that Fu Qingli had single-handedly killed 2 wild boars and saved the village's young men spread throughout the production brigade in less than half an incense stick's time. When Fu Qingli returned to her small rented room, the scent of blood still clung to her clothes. She entered, took off her blood-stained outer garment, washed it carefully with clean water, then lit a fire and cooked a simple bowl of noodles. She had barely finished eating when footsteps sounded outside her courtyard gate. Lu Daqiang first went to the educated youth quarters to tell everyone to come to the threshing ground for pork distribution, then hurried all the way to Fu Qingli's cottage to fetch her personally. He carried a full basket of eggs, a plucked chicken, a strip of cured meat, 1 jin of brown sugar, along with some potatoes and cabbage, rare precious goods in the village. "Comrade Fu, words cannot repay what you have done for us." Afraid that Fu Qingli would refuse the gifts, Lu Daqiang set everything down by the door and ran off at once, leaving no time for discussion. Fu Qingli had no shortage of food supplies and meant to decline, but he was already gone. She looked at the pile of goods and had no choice but to carry them inside. She had just set the things down when more footsteps approached. Su Hui, Tian Xiaomai and Xiao Xian walked over together and saw her carrying the goods into the house. All 3 had heard about what had happened up the mountain. When they finished work at noon, villagers everywhere were talking about the new educated youth Fu Qingli. She possessed extraordinary skill, had slain 2 enormous wild boars alone, and saved the brigade leader's grandson and a group of young men. They had seen the boars being carried back to the village, huge beasts with sharp, terrifying tusks. Just looking at them sent a chill down their spines. No one could believe such ferocious animals had been defeated by the beautiful Fu Qingli, who looked delicate and powerless. The three exchanged glances. Their eyes held shock, along with genuine admiration and warmth toward Fu Qingli. Sui said, "Comrade Fu, you're amazing. We all get to share in this meat because of you." Fu Qingli replied, "It was just a coincidence." Sui shook her head. "Coincidence or not, we have you to thank. Let's go to the threshing ground now." Fu Qingli nodded. "All right." Bai Tingting and the others, who had gone to the commune to collect grain, also returned. Hearing that pork was being distributed at the threshing ground, they quickly dumped their grain against the wall at the educated youth point and hurried over, fearing that all the best cuts would be taken before they arrived. When Fu Qingli reached the threshing ground, she saw villagers busy at work, some carrying water, some scraping pig hair, and others eviscerating the boar. Before long, the large wild boar was fully cut up. When the villagers spotted Fu Qingli, they all greeted her warmly. Even the several female, educated youths beside Fu Qingli were met with friendly smiles, leaving Su Hui and the others utterly astonished. Good heavens! Even those among them who had lived here the shortest time had stayed for 2 years, and this was the first time they had seen the villagers treat them so kindly. The favoritism became even clearer when it was time to divide the pork. The educated youths were asked to choose first. The village chief turned to the villagers, then looked at Fu Qingli. "Educated youth Fu, the pork has all been cut up. You get to pick first. With everyone's agreement, you'll receive 5 jin of pork. Every other villager and educated youth will get 3 jin each. There are 281 households in our village." Fu Qingli heard the village chief's words and did not decline. She stepped forward and chose the leanest cut. Seeing her choice, the village chief and the villagers hurried to persuade her. "Educated youth Fu, you're still young and don't know how to pick. Lean meat isn't tasty, it gets stuck between your teeth." An elderly aunt quickly grabbed a chunk of almost pure fat and held it out to Fu Qingli. "Girl, listen to me. Take this one. It's wonderful. Not only is it satisfying to eat, you can render lard from it. The oil makes stir, fried vegetables taste amazing, and the cracklings can be used to make dumplings. That lean meat isn't any good. Trust me, take this piece." The village chief and the other villagers chimed in. "That's right, educated youth Fu. Pick this one, it's far better." Fu Qingli glanced at the large chunk of fatty meat and shook her head. "Thank you all for your kindness, but I don't care for fatty meat. I'd like to keep this lean cut." Seeing she would not change her mind, everyone stopped trying to convince her. They tied the meat with hemp rope and handed it to her. Next came Su Hui and the other educated youths. They selected cuts with a mix of fat and lean meat, a choice that earned approving nods from the villagers. Soon, all the educated youths at the settlement had received their portions. Even Bai Tingting and her companions did not take only the fatty cuts. Once all the pork was distributed, 2 jin of meat remained, along with pig heads, trotters, large bones, and ribs. In this era, few people cared much for bones, yet they were still meat after all. A villager with slightly better circumstances spoke up. "Can we buy these leftovers?" The village chief agreed, as any money earned would go into the village's public fund. Seizing the chance, Fu Qingli bought 2 large bones and half a rack of ribs. The village chief initially refused to take payment, claiming bones were worthless, but Fu Qingli insisted on handing over 3 yuan. The village chief and all the villagers held an even higher opinion of her. The village chief's son helped chop the ribs into sections and split the large bones in half. Thinking about the vacant village accountant position, the village chief formed a plan. This young woman had a good character. She would be suitable to take on the role of village accountant. Those 3 yuan was more than fair compensation for the goods. The village chief looked over all the distributed meat. 2 jin of pork and cleaned offal were left, and there was no fair way to split them among anyone. He announced, "We'll cook a communal meal tonight. Anyone who has potatoes or cabbage at home can bring them along to add to the pot." He glanced at Fu Qingli and the other educated youths. "You're welcome to join us if you'd like." The educated youths were overjoyed and quickly nodded. Good quality oil and fat were scarce these days, and they could save their allocated pork to eat slowly as the weather was still cold. The crowd dispersed. The village chief asked several villagers to stay behind and prepare the communal feast. It had been many years since the village held a shared big pot meal, so the large iron cauldron was brought out and scrubbed thoroughly. When dinner time arrived, Villagers carried basins to collect their servings to take home. The woman serving food broke into a wide grin when she saw Fu Qingli. "Here you are, girl." She scooped 2 heaping ladles of stew into Fu Qingli's large bowl. Fu Qingli stared at the overflowing bowl. "That's too much. I won't be able to finish it." The aunt smiled warmly. "Silly girl, you can heat up the leftovers tomorrow morning." The surrounding villagers watched the piled, high serving and raised no objections. They smiled and echoed her words. "Exactly. Save the leftovers and reheat them for breakfast tomorrow." With no other choice, Fu Qingli carried her stew away. On the path, she ran into Bai Tingting and her companions. Bai Tingting caught sight of Fu Qingli's overflowing bowl and swallowed hard. "It's not fair. Why does she get such a big portion while I only have 1 ladle's worth? I'm going back to demand an explanation." She turned, ready to storm back. Gao Nana quickly grabbed her arm. "Have you lost your senses? Don't stop me. I need to ask them why they treat us so differently," Bai Tingting snapped. "Have you forgotten why we even get to eat pork today?" Gao Nana said. "It's only reasonable that educated youth Fu gets a larger share. That doesn't mean they can favor her so blatantly," Bai Tingting retorted. Gao Nana shot her a sharp look and pulled her arm free. "I'm warning you. The villagers never took well to educated youths. If you go and stir up trouble, don't be surprised if they make things difficult for you." She turned and walked forward. Bai Tingting gritted her teeth, stamped her foot, and hurried after Gao Nana toward the educated youth settlement, grumbling complaints the whole way. Back at the educated youth point, Fu Qingli entered her room, set down her bowl of awful stew, locked the door, and stepped into her spatial realm. Beside the main building in the space stood a kitchen she had recently built, fully furnished with cooking equipment. She went inside, steamed a pot of mixed grain buns, and simmered a pot of bone broth. Once the broth was ready, she drank a bowl and ate 1 bun. She poured the remaining bone broth into a clay pot and packed the stew from her large bowl into another container. The dish was more of a hearty mixed stew: potatoes, cabbage, turnips, potato noodles, dried vegetables, pork intestines, pork liver, pork heart, and pork lungs. The pig head and trotters had already been bought by other villagers. That night, every villager slept soundly. It had been far too long since they had eaten such rich, filling food, and many wore faint smiles even in their sleep. Around 9 o'clock at night, Fu Qingli noticed the village had fallen completely quiet, everyone fast asleep. She quietly exited her room, locked the door, climbed over the rear wall, and headed toward the cattle shed, some distance away from the educated youth housing. She knocked gently on the shed door. The person inside was startled and whispered cautiously, "Who's there?" Fu Qingli said nothing and knocked once more. After a short pause, the door creaked open. The man spotted a clay pot and a cloth bundle sitting on the ground. The elderly man warily scanned his surroundings before dragging the items inside the shed. Soon, a lamp lit up within. 3 elderly men gathered around. "What's this? It smells incredible." Guazi lifted the lid off one clay pot and saw the mixed stew. His mouth watered. He opened the second pot and stared at the milky white bone broth in shock. "Who left these things?" Guazi shook his head and untied the cloth bundle to find mixed grain buns. His expression grew complicated. At that moment, Song Jianjun rushed outside. He searched the area thoroughly but saw no one suspicious. Frowning, he returned to the shed. All 3 men stared at the food in silence. Guazi spoke up. "Brother Gao, what do you make of this? Who would send us such food?" Gao Guoxing shook his head. "I have no idea." Gao Guoxing, Guazi, and Song Jianjun stared at the 2 pots and steamed buns, their mouths watering. Song Jianjun voiced his worry. "Do you think this food could be poisoned?" Gao Guoxing let out a faint huff. "No one would waste such precious provisions just to poison us." Song Jianjun thought it over and had to agree. Guazi glanced at the other 2 men. "Brothers, whether this food is poisoned or not, I would rather die full than starve to death." He picked up a steamed bun, took a bite, then sampled some stew. His eyes fluttered shut. Delicious. Gao Guoxing and Song Jianjun exchanged a look, then picked up buns and chopsticks to eat as well. They sipped the warm bone broth and sighed happily at the rich flavor. Before long, they finished every last bit of food. Stuffed full, they lay on the earthen kong, lost in thought. How many years had it been since they had eaten their fill? Tears soon rolled down their cheeks. They had a full stomach tonight, but what of their families? They had been forced to publicly sever ties with their relatives back then, yet their loved ones would inevitably suffer guilt by association. Fu Qingli watched them carry the goods into the cattle shed before turning silently back to the educated youth point. She could not reveal herself yet. The time was not right. If she showed up now, the elderly men might suspect she had ulterior motives. It was wiser to remain hidden for now. She slipped back over the wall into the courtyard, locked her room door, and entered her spatial realm. As soon as she appeared, the colorful divine bird fluttered over to her. "Master, where did you go? When can you take me outside?" Fu Qingli slapped her forehead. She had completely forgotten their conversation. "I'm sorry. It's far too cold outside to bring you along right now. Once the weather warms up in a while, I'll take you out." The colorful divine bird drooped, clearly disappointed. Seeing this, Fu Qingli thought of a task for it. "Kair, would you help me plant rice along the river in the space, and wheat and corn on the open land?" The colorful divine bird stared blankly for a moment. "Kair, are you calling me?" "Of course," Fu Qingli smiled softly. "Don't you think it suits you? It matches your brilliant, multicolored plumage." The bird tilted its head and pondered. The name did sound quite nice. "Very well, I will allow you to call me that. But master, are you certain you want to grow such ordinary crops in the space?" "I am certain." "All right, but you need to find seeds first. There are no mundane crop seeds inside the space. I will source plenty of seeds in the city when I get the chance." "Great. I'll help you plant them once you bring them." Fu Qingli nodded. "Go play for now. I'm going to begin my cultivation." "Understood, master." Fu Qingli walked over to the spiritual spring well, sat cross-legged, and continued cultivating. She remained in meditation straight through until dawn. This day marked the final rest day the village chief had granted the newly arrived educated youths. After a simple breakfast inside the spatial realm, Fu Qingli left the space and set off for the city. After winding through numerous alleyways, she located the black market. Finding a secluded spot, she entered her space to change into plain, unremarkable clothes and applied light disguise. She covered most of her face with a scarf and put on a wide-brimmed hat before walking into the market. She successfully found rice, wheat, and corn seeds, though she saw no vegetable seeds. Presumably, no one was trading them. She wandered the market briefly, found nothing else she needed, and turned to leave. She had only walked a short distance when an elderly man around 60 or 70 years old stepped in front of her. "Comrade, I have some fine goods. Would you care to take a look?" Fu Qingli studied the man. His skin was dark and weathered, yet an air of erudition lingered about him, impossible to hide. Curiosity stirred within her. "What do you have?" The man carefully pulled a wooden box from inside his coat and lifted the lid slightly. One glance was enough to catch Fu Qingli's attention. Inside rested a complete set of glass-type imperial green jade jewelry, earrings, a bead necklace, a ring, a jade bangle, and a jade hairpin, all matching. These were truly extraordinary treasures. Even with countless rare artifacts stored in her space, she could not help but admire them. "What do you want in exchange?" Fu Qingli asked directly. The man hesitated briefly before steeling himself. "I need 100 jin of rice, 50 jin of wheat flour, 30 jin of cornmeal, 3 jin of pork, 3 chickens, and 30 eggs." After speaking, he grew nervous, unsure whether the person before him would agree. From what he could see, this individual had paid no attention to grain supplies in the market, so they were likely well-resourced. Fu Qingli nodded gently. "I accept. These items would be priceless in later years." Even though they were not worth a fortune in the present time, she had no wish to take advantage of the elderly man. "Where shall we complete the trade?" The man quickly gave her an address. Fu Qingli acknowledged. "I will arrive at the location you mentioned at 9 o'clock tonight." "Wonderful, wonderful." The man nodded excitedly, his eyes growing moist. Fu Qingli turned and departed. The man stared at her retreating figure, wiped a tear from his eye, glanced around warily, and hurried away. Fu Qingli found another quiet, empty spot and entered her spatial realm. She walked to the corner of the bamboo building and began taking stock of her stored supplies. The inventory took over an hour to finish. She held roughly 1,000 jin of rice, 500 jin of wheat flour, 500 jin of cornmeal, 500 jin of mixed grain flour, 500 jin of sorghum flour, 100 jin of pork, 200 eggs, and 20 clean chickens. After setting aside the goods promised to the elderly man, she would retain 900 jin of rice, 450 jin of wheat flour, 470 jin of cornmeal, 500 jin of mixed grain flour, 500 jin of sorghum flour, 97 jin of pork, 170 eggs, and 17 chickens. She also had 10 tins of Shanghai malted milk, 10 boxes of Hongqing milk powder, 10 bags of white rabbit cream candies, 10 gin of brown sugar, 10 gin of white sugar, 10 gin of rock sugar, and 5 sets of thickened bedding. In addition, there were 10 Shanghai brand wristwatches, 2 black and white televisions, 5 sewing machines, 5 bicycles, and 3 double-eared iron pots. Originally, there had been 5. One was in the kitchen within the space and another in an outside kitchen, leaving 3 remaining. There were 5 kitchen cleavers, 5 spatulas, 5 kerosene lamps, 2 large 40-gin barrels of kerosene, and 2 small 10-gin barrels of kerosene. She also owned 5 packs of Double Happiness cigarettes, 5 packs of Dakianmin cigarettes, 5 packs of Mutin cigarettes, and 5 packs of Feng Wang cigarettes. She even discovered liquor stock, 1 crate of 24 bottles of Mutai, 1 crate of 24 bottles of Wuliangya, and 1 crate of 24 bottles of Fenjiao. The rest consisted of assorted daily necessities: basins, towels, mirrors, combs, thermos flasks, sanitary supplies, toilet paper, plus clothes, trousers, shoes, and socks suited to the era. In one corner, she spotted an old locked chest. Opening it was no trouble. She gripped the copper lock and pulled gently, and the lock snapped open at once. Several small boxes sat inside the chest. She opened the first and found it filled with gold bars. Fu Qingli lifted one casually. Each weighed roughly 1 tael, traditional small gold ingots, 10 in total. The second box held a collection of jewelry. Though inferior in quality to the imperial green jade set, the pieces were still finely crafted. The third box contained a thick stack of various ration coupons. When she opened the final box, she saw neatly arranged 10 yuan banknotes. A quick rough count showed a total of 50,000 yuan. Fu Qingli understood immediately. These must be most of the fortune the original host Fu Qingao had accumulated in her previous life. A faint smile tugged at her lips. She could not help but admire the original heroine. Truly favored by fate, she had managed to gather so many precious goods. She wondered what Fu Qingyao's reaction would be if she learned that all her lifelong savings had fallen into someone else's hands overnight. Meanwhile, in the capital city, Fu Qingyao jolted awake from her sleep, clutching her chest as unease washed over her. Lately, she had been extremely sleepy, often dozing off even during the day. She pressed a hand to her heart, overcome with a strange feeling that something incredibly important was slipping away from her. The hollow sensation lingered, yet she could not name exactly what she had lost, leaving her irritable and restless. To make matters worse, the other families in the compound stared at her with disdain and coldness, adding to her frustration. She was engaged to Song Yang, and their wedding was scheduled for half a month later. Though the Fu and Song families had publicly stated the childhood engagement was not bound to a specific daughter, meaning either Fu Qingyao or Fu Qingli could marry Song Yang, the residents of the compound refused to believe it. They rolled their eyes at her and whispered behind her back. Song Yang's attitude toward her had also grown far less warm than before. Song Yang's parents regarded her with icy distance, as if she were something unclean. Fu Qingyao seethed inwardly. Those old fools. Once she married into the Song family, she would make them pay. The oppressive sense of loss grew stronger. She decided to get out of bed and stretch her legs to clear her mind. Not watching her step, she tripped over her dressing stool. Her abdomen slammed hard against the dressing table. She cried out in sharp pain and blacked out. Jiang Meihua heard the commotion and rushed over from the kitchen. Entering Fu Qingyao's room, she saw her daughter collapsed on the ground with blood pooling beneath her. She screamed in terror. She scrambled over to check Fu Qingyao's condition, then stumbled outside to make a phone call. Jiangwo, come home quickly. Something terrible has happened to Yao Yao. Fu Jiangwo frowned upon receiving the call. Stay there. I'll be right back. Fu Jiangwo soon arrived by car. Seeing Fu Qingyao lying in a pool of blood, he rushed forward and lifted her up. Hurry, take her to hospital. They rushed Fu Qingyao to the medical facility. Doctors immediately wheeled her into the operating room. Fu Jiangwo sent a guard to notify the Song family. The Songs arrived shortly after, pacing anxiously outside the operating theater. Around 2 hours later, Fu Qingyao was pushed out of surgery. Jiang Meihua hurried forward. Doctor, how is my daughter? The doctor looked at her gravely. I'm sorry. She has lost the child. Jiang Meihua's gaze darted toward the Song family members. Song's father met her eyes and spoke. As long as she survives, all is well. They're still young. They can have more children in the future. The doctor glanced between the Song family and Fu Jiangwo. He seemed about to add something, but finally closed his mouth and said nothing. Fu Qingao was transferred to a ward, and the doctor explained all necessary aftercare instructions. Fu Jiangwo had noticed the doctor's unfinished words. His eyes narrowed in thought. Yes, Jiang Meihua said. I still have things to take care of. You stay and look after Yao in the ward. Jiang Meihua nodded. Before long, Fu Jiangwo found the attending doctor to ask about Fu Qingyao's condition. When the doctor saw Fu Jiangwo, he told him everything about Fu Qingyao. You need to prepare yourself. The patient has suffered severe uterine damage and will most likely struggle to conceive in the future. Fu Jiangwo shuddered at the news. Is it that serious? The doctor nodded. It's best not to let the patient know for now. She may not be able to bear such a blow. Fu Jiangwo nodded, sighed, and walked out of the doctor's office. On the other side, after sorting out her belongings, Fu Qingli felt hungry and emerged from her space. She had heard that the state-run restaurants of this era served authentic, delicious food, so she decided to go and try some. The moment Fu Qingli stepped into the state-run restaurant, she immediately drew everyone's gaze. It was no wonder. She had a beautiful face, fair skin, and was neatly and decently dressed. Fu Qingli looked at the menu posted on the wall and ordered a plate of braised pork, a plate of stewed tofu, an egg drop soup, plus a bowl of rice. The waitress wrote out the bill. Fu Qingli paid the money and food coupons, then found a table to sit at. Soon, a voice called out the ready dishes from the service window, and Fu Qingli heard her order being announced. She quickly picked up a ceramic plate, walked over to the window, and carried her meal back to the table. After taking one bite of the braised pork, Fu Qingli's eyes lit up instantly. Wow, this was amazing. Pork from this era really tasted wonderful. The meat was tender and soft when eaten, richly aromatic, sweet and mellow, with no strange aftertaste, only the pure, genuine flavor of pork, growing more savory with every chew. This was proper braised pork. She could not help taking several more mouthfuls, closing her eyes and looking thoroughly content. Ji Xiangdong turned around and caught sight of the scene. It was her, the sharp young woman who had subdued the human traffickers at the train station. Watching her eat with such enjoyment, Ji Xiangdong unconsciously swallowed. The braised pork looked incredibly appetizing. He turned straight to the service window and ordered a serving for himself. His braised pork arrived shortly afterwards. He took a bite, and the corners of his mouth tugged upward slightly. The flavor really was excellent. No wonder the young woman was enjoying her meal so much. He watched her shoveling food into her mouth like a little squirrel, and thought she looked exceptionally lovely. Lu Lin, sitting opposite him, raised an eyebrow at the sight. What's wrong with you? You look distracted. Ji Xiangdong nearly choked on his mouthful of braised pork. He glared at Lu Lin. Don't talk nonsense. You're the one acting strangely. I ought to ask you, what brings you here? Lu Lin spoke calmly. What do you mean? Can you come here, but I cannot? That's not what I meant. With your background, you shouldn't be in a small county like this. Even if you plan to transfer out of the military, this isn't the sort of place you would be assigned to. Lu Lin fell silent for a moment. Why shouldn't I be here? If you can come, why can't I take up a post here? Ji Xiangdong rolled his eyes, as if he did not know the reason Ji Xiangdong had come. Thinking about his cousin, Ji Xiangdong suddenly lost his appetite for the pork. He looked up at Lu Lin. Does your grandfather know you've come to this region? Lu Lin, no. Ji Xiangdong stared in surprise. What? Your grandfather doesn't know you're here. Lu Lin, he thinks I'm away on a mission. Ji Xiangdong gave him a thumbs up. Bold. Truly bold. Aren't you afraid your grandfather will give you a severe dressing down once he finds out? Lu Lin, what's there to fear? At worst, I'll get a scolding from him. Ji Xiangdong, I admire you. By the way, hasn't your young uncle woken up yet? Lu Lin, no. He's been in a coma for 3 months. The doctors say the chance of him regaining consciousness is slim. Ji Xiangdong sighed after hearing this. Keep hoping. Your uncle is a fortunate man. He will wake up. Lu Lin did not reply. He thought of his young uncle, only 3 years older than himself, and his gaze darkened. The public only knew that his uncle was the youngest regiment commander in the military region and had fallen into a coma after sustaining injuries during a mission. Few knew of his secret role, head of a special task force. This unit took on unusual incidents, bizarre cases, and extraordinary missions that local authorities and regular departments could not handle. When he first learned his uncle had been critically wounded, He rushed to his grandfather's study. Normally, guards were always posted outside, but that day the doorway stood empty. He thought his grandfather was out and was about to leave when he heard voices coming from inside. He lightened his steps. The door was not fully closed, left slightly ajar. He was about to push the door open when an unfamiliar voice spoke first. "Chief Liu, you must prepare yourself." Whatever injured Regiment Commander Liu was no ordinary threat. At those words, Lu Lin shoved the door open and stared at the stranger inside. "What do you mean it was no ordinary threat? Explain clearly what hurt my uncle." Lu Zheng snapped sharply. "Who allowed you to enter? Get out." The stranger frowned at Lu Lin, who had burst in. He set down a small vial of medicinal pellets and prepared to take his leave. "Chief Liu, I have urgent matters to attend to. I shall take my leave." Lu Lin immediately stepped forward to block his path. "Don't go. Tell me exactly what injured my uncle. Not a single word of what happened today may leave this room. You are forbidden from investigating this on your own." With that, he picked up the vial of pellets on the desk and walked out of the study. Lu Lin was filled with overwhelming frustration and began investigating privately. Eventually, Lu Zheng had no choice but to summon him to the study, ordering him to stop digging. The matter was top state secret. He then shared a limited amount of information that could be disclosed. Only then did Lu Lin understand why his uncle had advanced so quickly through the ranks. Beyond his public position as regiment commander, he headed the special task force. His uncle had slipped into this coma after suffering severe injuries while responding to an extraordinary incident. Lu Lin had requested his current post in the northeast because he had traced the location of his uncle's attack to this region, though he did not know the exact spot. Ji Xiangdong watched Lu Lin's quiet, somber expression and did not disturb him, silently sighing. It was truly a loss for such an outstanding man. He glanced backward instinctively. The young woman who had been eating there moments earlier was gone. Ji Xiangdong looked confused. Had she finished eating that quickly? Lu Lin pulled himself out of his thoughts and noticed Ji Xiangdong constantly glancing behind them. He guessed what Ji Xiangdong was looking at and turned to follow his line of sight, yet saw nothing. He frowned slightly. Had he imagined things earlier? Shortly after they finished their meal, Ji Xiangdong took Lu Lin to register for work at the County Public Security Group. Elsewhere, Fu Qingli found a secluded spot where no one could see her and slipped into her space. She lay down helplessly on the rocking chair and sighed inwardly. She had not even finished her meal. Her monthly cycle had suddenly started. What a waste of that delicious braised pork. Thankfully, she had reacted quickly and found a hidden place to enter her space. Or she would have faced an awkward situation in public. She had stocked up on sanitary supplies inside her space. She had no intention of selling them. They were reserved purely for her own use. Though the quality could not compare to products from later decades, having something was far better than nothing. She checked the time. It was past 1 in the afternoon. There was still a long while until 9 o'clock that night. She walked over to the spiritual spring water, sat cross-legged, and began cultivating. Time passed, and it was 9 o'clock in the evening. Fu Qingli left her space and headed to the meeting spot. She had agreed on with the elderly man. She looked carefully all around to confirm there was no one nearby before taking out the pre-prepared grain sacks from her space. She knocked gently on the courtyard gate, which opened soon after. When the old man saw the young woman from that morning, his eyes immediately locked onto the bulging sacks at her feet. His cloudy eyes lit up, his tense shoulders relaxed, and he let out a long breath. He quickly stepped aside to invite her into the yard. Fu Qingli carried the sacks of grain into the courtyard. The old man hurried forward, his fingers brushing lightly over the sturdy cloth sacks, trembling uncontrollably. He fumbled to untie the rope knot and peered inside. White rice and flour came into view. The old man's eyes grew hot, and he was close to shedding tears. In this era of shortages, sufficient grain was more precious than any valuables. With this, his young grandson could finally eat his fill, and no longer endure hunger alongside him. Once both sides counted the goods and confirmed everything matched, Fu Qingli took her leave. After walking a distance and ensuring the surrounding area was empty, Fu Qingli took out her bicycle and rode towards Xiangyang Production Brigade. She had not traveled far when two figures suddenly rushed out to block her path. Zhang San and Li Si looked Fu Qingli up and down. A cloth covered part of her face, hiding her full features. But from their experience, the young woman must be very beautiful. Seeing a woman riding alone late at night, the two jumped to unfair conclusions. Zhang San stroked his chin and whistled. "Well now, young lady. Where are you off to so late? How about we two accompany you along the way? Zhang San and Li Si exchanged a glance, grinning maliciously. Fu Qingli shot them a cold look. Get out of my way if you value your safety. Her sharp attitude only stoked their recklessness. Oh, we've got a feisty one here. I like that. Zhang San spoke. Here's the deal. Hand over all your valuables and the bicycle, and we'll let you go. Fu Qingli's gaze turned icy. You're asking for trouble. She pushed her bicycle aside, stepped forward quickly, and threw a heavy punch straight at Zhang San. Zhang San had not expected her to attack without warning. He was caught completely off guard and sent flying 2 meters away. He crashed heavily onto the ground. A bitter metallic taste filled his mouth, and he spat a mouthful of blood onto the dirt, mixed with 2 broken teeth. Blood streamed steadily from his nose. Seeing Zhang San knocked down, Li Si roared. Brat, you're looking for death. As he shouted, he pulled a short knife from his coat and charged straight at Fu Qingli. Fu Qingli raised her arm to block, when a figure suddenly darted out from her left and kicked Li Si hard in the chest. Li Si flew backward and curled up on the ground, crying out in pain. Ji Xiangdong stepped forward, snatched the knife from his hand, pulled out handcuffs and secured Li Si tightly. Seeing his partner arrested, Zhang San scrambled to his feet and tried to run. Ji Xiangdong sprinted after him, grabbing him by the collar. Where do you think you're going? In an instant, Zhang San was also handcuffed. Ji Xiangdong dragged the 2 men together and turned to Fu Qingli. Comrade, are you hurt? Fu Qingli replied calmly. I'm fine. Relief washed over Ji Xiangdong knowing she was unharmed. He knew even without his intervention, this woman had the skill to defend herself. He had witnessed her capabilities at the train station. Yet when he saw the blade lunging toward her, his body had moved instinctively. Deep down, he could not bear to see her harmed. Only once he confirmed she was safe did his worry fade away. Comrade, my name is Ji Xiangdong from the County Public Security Group. Thank you for helping apprehend these 2 criminals. May I ask your name? Fu Qingli looked at Ji Xiangdong, surprised to find he worked for the Public Security Group, the equivalent of police stations in later times. She thought that she might need his assistance someday, so she answered. My name is Fu Qingli. Ji Xiangdong's eyes brightened at the sound of her name. It sounded lovely. Come find me at the Public Security Group if you ever run into trouble. Fu Qingli nodded faintly, then mounted her bicycle and rode away. He watched her receding figure and slapped his forehead in frustration. Oh no, I forgot to ask where she lives. Will she encounter more danger on the road, traveling alone this late? He glanced down at the 2 trembling criminals at his feet and tapped each of them hard on the back of the head. Attempted robbery and assault at night is an extremely serious crime in this era. You 2 will face severe punishment. When Zhang San and Li Si heard what awaited them and thought about all the other crimes they had committed, terror overwhelmed them. Their legs went weak and they lost control of their bladders. How could this happen? Shortly afterward, Ji Xiangdong escorted the 2 men back to the Public Security Group. On the other side, Fu Qingli soon arrived at Kaoshan Production Brigade. When she neared the brigade settlement, she stored her bicycle inside her space and covered the remaining distance on foot. Toward the educated youth dormitory. She checked the time, it was almost 10 at night. The other educated youths were all asleep. She slipped quietly into her room without waking anyone, bolted the door, and entered her space with a thought. She walked over to the spiritual spring, drank some water, sat cross-legged, and resumed her cultivation. A hospital ward in the capital city. The unconscious Fu Qingya was trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake. Piercing agony washed over her, making it almost impossible to breathe. She stared at Fu Qingchen and Fu Qingsa standing before her and begged desperately. Eldest brother, second brother, please stop. I know I was wrong. Spare me, I beg you. Don't harm my family. Fu Qingchen's voice was cold. Spare you? Who spared Qingqing back then? Fu Qingyao trembled. Aren't you afraid Mom and Dad will find out? They will never forgive you for treating me like this. Fu Qingse let out a cold laugh. Rest assured. Fu Jiangwo and that woman Jiang Meihua will join you soon enough. Fu Qingyao stared at him in disbelief. What do you mean? Are you going to harm Mom and Dad too? Fu Qingse, father? Does Fu Jiangwo deserve that title? He ceased being our father the day he let Jiang Meihua drive our birth mother to her death. As for Jiang Meihua, we have never acknowledged her. A homewrecker does not deserve to be called our mother. His gaze turned vicious. We never imagined Fu Jiangwo would be so blinded by infatuation that he signed Qingqing up for rural reclamation. If he had not done that, Qingqing would never have died alone and abandoned under a cold bridge, with no one to claim her body. With those words, Fu Qingse picked up an iron rod and swung it hard at Fu Qingyao. Blow after blow landed. Fu Qingyao screamed continuously. "Second brother, I'm sorry. I truly know my mistake. Please stop, I'll die if you keep hitting me." The moment she said second brother, Fu Qingse's eyes turned bloodshot. "Don't call me that. You are unworthy." He raised the iron rod high and brought it crashing down onto her mouth. A dull crack echoed through the air. Agony exploded across Fu Qingyao's face. Warm, thick blood filled her mouth. She stumbled and fell heavily onto the muddy ground, clamping both hands over her mouth. Broken, shrill whimpers escaped her throat, blood streaming through her fingers. She felt hard fragments inside her mouth. She spat hard, and more than a dozen teeth mixed with blood foam rolled onto the ground. Staring at the broken teeth, intense hatred welled up in Fu Qingyao's eyes. She had never expected Fu Qingse to strike so ruthlessly, nearly knocking out all her teeth. Beside them, Song Yang stared rigidly. He wanted to run, yet his limbs went limp and he could not stand. He had no idea what Fu Qingchen and Fu Qingse intended for them, and could only collapse on the ground like a defenseless victim. Fu Qingyao's young son and daughter burst into terrified cries at the horrifying sight. Seeing his grandchildren crying in terror, Father Song quickly pulled the two children behind him to shield them. Fu Qingse looked at Fu Qingyao's battered form, and a cold smirk tugged at his lips. "This is not nearly enough. Compared to all the suffering Qingqing endured, your pain is trivial." He raised the iron rod once more and struck Fu Qingyao again and again. Her ribs cracked under the blows. Her face became covered in blood, her lips split open. Weak, muffled cries mixed with ragged gasps spilled from her mouth. Second brother, stop, I'm sorry, I truly regret everything." Hearing her address him as second brother again sent Fu Qingse into a rage. He was about to strike once more when Fu Qingchen held him back. "If she cannot learn her lesson, we shall cut out her tongue." Fu Qingchen pulled a dagger from his waist and walked slowly toward Fu Qingyao. At the sight of the glinting blade, Fu Qingyao broke down completely, shaking her head and begging frantically. "Don't. I'm sorry, please," she knelt and kowtowed repeatedly. Fu Qingchen looked at her bloodied, tear-streaked face with disgust. Suppressing his revulsion, he gripped her jaw firmly. The blade flashed down. Excruciating pain washed over Fu Qingyao, and she blacked out instantly. Song Yang caught sight of the half-tongue lying on the ground beside her and lost control of his body. He dropped to his knees with a thud and kowtowed desperately. "Eldest brother, second brother, I know my wrongs. It was all this woman's fault. She led me astray. Spare my life, I beg you." The rest of the Song family trembled in fear. Mother Song could not bear the shock. She clutched her chest, her vision swimming, and fainted. The two children were so frightened they could barely stay conscious. Father Song struggled to steady himself amid his terror. "Aiken, let us talk this through calmly." Fu Qingchen ignored Father Song completely, his cold gaze settling on Song Yang. "If you cannot control your reckless choices, then you shall lose the ability to make them again." Cold light flashed. Song Yang looked down at himself in disbelief. Agony swept over him, and he let out a heart-wrenching scream, "No." Clutching his body, he rolled wildly on the ground before his eyes rolled back, and he passed out from the overwhelming pain. Father Song stared at his son's bleeding lower body, then at the mass of flesh on the ground, his blood turning cold. He had never imagined how ruthless Fu Qingchen could be. Not only had he cut out Fu Qingyao's tongue, but he had also crippled his own son. Hatred and terror surged through him at the same moment. He hated Fu Qingyao. If she had not tempted his son, the Song family would never have ended up in such a situation. Yet he feared the two brothers far more. The chill of death hung heavy over every one of them. Glancing at his young grandchildren beside him, Father Song closed his eyes and spoke in a hoarse voice. "Aiken, nothing can change what has happened now. I beg you to spare the two children. They are innocent." "Innocent?" Fu Qingchen's gaze turned icy. When Fu Qingyao stepped over Fu Qingqing to seize wealth and luxury, where was her sense of innocence? They can only blame themselves for being born into the wrong family. A heavy wave of sorrow washed over Father Song after hearing those words. He looked at the terrified children and shut his eyes tightly. "If you kill all of us, you will not escape retribution." Fu Qingchen and Fu Qingse stared coldly at him. "What becomes of us is none of your concern. You would do better to worry about yourself." Then a torch came crashing down, landing on Fu Qingyao. Flames burst to life around her in an instant. The searing pain jolted Fu Qingao awake from unconsciousness. Harsh wails echoed through the warehouse. She screamed frantically inside her mind, "Help! Someone save me! They have completely lost their minds. They are torturing her all for Fu Qingqing's sake." Watching her scream in agony, a flicker of satisfaction crossed the faces of Fu Qingqin and Fu Qingse. Next, Fu Qingao could only watch helplessly as they hurled torches toward the rest of her family. Ultimate despair crashed over her. She let out broken, muffled cries. No. Regret flooded her heart. She regretted ever crossing paths with Fu Qingqing. As she watched her loved ones thrash and scream amid the flames, her vision blurred, and she spat out a mouthful of black blood before sinking into endless darkness. Through the haze, urgent calls drifted into her ears. Her eyelids felt as heavy as lead. Pain lingered in every limb, and she longed to drift off and never wake again. Yet the calls persisted, and a hand gently shook her body. With every last ounce of strength, she struggled to lift her heavy eyelids. Staring at the unfamiliar surroundings, Fu Qingao was utterly confused. What was going on? She should have burned to death. Where was this place? Could this be the underworld? But everything before her looked nothing like what she had imagined. And her mother appeared far younger. She instinctively reached out and touched Jiang Meiwa's cheek. Warmth met her fingertips. How could a corpse still feel warm? At that moment, Jiang Meiwa pressed her palm to her forehead and heaved a long sigh of relief. Your fever has finally broken. Fu Qingao looked at Jiang Meiwa, then turned to see Song Yang and Mr. and Mrs. Song standing nearby. She was completely stunned. Mom? Song Yang? You didn't die. Nonsense. Don't talk such rubbish. Jiang Meiwa said quickly. Has the fever addled your wits? Stop speaking of death. Rest well, and you will have children again someday. Children? What children? Jiang Meiwa's eyes reddened. She thought her daughter could not accept the loss of her baby and spoke softly to comfort her. Yao, dear. Let us nurse your health first. More children will come. Song Yang and his parents stepped forward at once. Yao, you're still young. You will definitely have children again. Do not blame yourself too much. Fu Qingao looked at each of them in turn. Fragments of memories flooded into her mind, soon tangling with the visions of her brutal death in her past life. Her pupils trembled violently, filled with disbelief. She had been reborn. Wild joy quickly gave way to a storm of grief and anger. She laughed and wept, clutching Jiang Meiwa's hand tightly. Mom, I'm alive. I didn't die. Jiang Meiwa looked at her distraught daughter with pity, still believing the breakdown stemmed from losing her child. She patted her back gently to soothe her. It's all right, dear. After crying it out, Fu Qingao calmed down, a bitter resentment taking root in her heart. Why? Why could she not have been reborn earlier? And why were events unfolding differently from her previous life this time around? She narrowed her eyes sharply. Something was wrong with Fu Qingqing, now known as Fu Qingli. Could she have also been reborn? If she had returned to the past, why would she still come to the countryside? Anyone reborn would make eliminating her their first priority. But if she was not reborn, why had fate shifted so drastically from the last life? Seeing her daughter fall silent, Jiang Meiwa assumed she was still drowning in grief over her lost child. She sighed softly and stroked the top of Fu Qingyao's head. Yao, do not grieve over the baby. You are still young. You and Song Yang will have another. Song Yang echoed her gently. That's right, Yao. We will be married soon. There will be other children. Do not be too sad. Fu Qingao glanced at Jiang Meiwa, then Song Yang, and instinctively rested a hand on her lower abdomen. Her child, her first baby. The child she had anticipated and cherished so deeply had been lost in this timeline. A tear slid down her cheek. It was all Fu Qingli's fault. She had altered everything and caused her baby's death. She would avenge this grievance. She lifted her head and looked at the people before her. Mom, uncle, aunt, Yonggo, please head back first. I want some quiet to rest. Do not worry, I will be fine. Jiang Meiwa remained anxious and wanted to stay to look after her, but Fu Qingao politely refused. Mom, I want the chicken soup you make yourself. Of course. I will go home and make it right away. Seeing this, Song Yang and his family left the ward as well. Once the door closed, Fu Qingao was alone. The image of the mysterious jade pendant flashed through her mind, and vicious hatred surged in her eyes, as if a vengeful spirit had crawled up from hell. Fu Qingli, it is all your fault that I ended up suffering like this. And your two elder brothers. They pretended to be polite to me while gathering information. Once they found what they wanted about you, they locked my entire family in an abandoned warehouse. My children and my family were all burned alive in that fire. How cruel they were. The shrill cries of children and the desperate screams of her relatives echoed in her thoughts. Her eyes turned red, and her nails dug deep into her palms. Fu Qingchen, Fu Qingse, mark my words. I will make you suffer endlessly and die a miserable death. I will force you to watch the sister you protect with everything suffer torment beyond escape. For now, however, the most important task was to get hold of the jade pendant. Only with that pendant could she gain access to powerful figures. She had to recover her strength and take the pendant back. On the other side, Fu Qingli slowly opened her eyes after cultivating through the whole night. She checked the time, washed herself simply inside her spatial dimension, ate a light breakfast, and then left the space. As soon as she stepped out of the door, the work bell of the production team rang in the distance. She locked the door and headed toward the threshing ground. On the way, she ran into Su Hui and the others. When Su Hui spotted Fu Qingli, she hurried forward to greet her. "Comrade Fu, are you heading out for work duty?" Fu Qingli nodded. "It is time to start work. The work today is extremely unpleasant. Are you sure you want to go?" Su Hui looked surprised. "Unpleasant? What work have we been assigned today?" "Breaking manure piles." Su Hui's face twisted with disgust as she spoke. "I have no intention of doing that. I will go talk to the team leader soon and ask for lighter work. I do not mind earning fewer work points. If that does not work, I will simply ask for leave and skip it." Su Hui went on to complain. "You have no idea. There is little farm work to do in northeast China in March because the ground is still frozen. All we can do is break up manure, pig manure from the pigsties and cow dung from the cattle sheds. The manure has frozen into solid chunks. We have to hack at them with pickaxes. Every strike sends vibrations up our arms, and shards of ice mixed with dirt splash all over our clothes. It is freezing and reeks terribly. Once broken apart, we load it onto carts. While the ground is still hard, we drive ox-drawn sleds to haul manure to the fields, stacking piles at the edge of the plots as base fertilizer for the spring crops. That is why I want to avoid this job. I plan to wait a few days and look for easier tasks like repairing plows and twisting hemp rope. April is even more exhausting. The frozen earth gradually thaws, turning the fields muddy. Then we have to pull up stubble, digging out the old corn and sorghum roots left in the soil one by one. The half-soft, half-hard ground makes the work doubly taxing. After that comes ridging, soil preparation, plowing, spreading manure, and everything needed to get ready for sowing. At this point, Su Hui sighed. It is truly exhausting. Every night when I get back to the educated youth dormitory, I just collapse on the kang and cannot bring myself to move. Sowing cannot start until May. At best, we can rush to plant spring wheat and soybeans in late April. When seeding, everyone has to bend over to place seeds. Your waist aches unbearably by the end of the day, and the weather remains cold enough to crack our hands. Once March, April, and May pass, things ease up a little. Then the months leading into harvest arrive, and the work becomes brutal enough to wear anyone out. Su Hui heaved another sigh. When will this kind of hardship end? After listening to Su Hui's account, Fu Qingli felt a headache coming on. She knew life in the Northeast would be tough, but she had not imagined it would be this harsh. The thought of breaking frozen manure alone was unbearable. From the original host's memories, she had never broken manure, yet she seemed to have hauled manure by sled before. Fu Qingli frowned. What should she do? Should she also ask for leave? Lost in thought, they reached the threshing ground. The production team leader called out, "Everyone is here. Today's task is breaking and hauling manure. Those ready can go collect tools and register." The team leader turned his gaze toward Fu Qingli. "Comrade Fu, come with me." Fu Qingli had just been trying to figure out how to ask for leave when the leader called her over. She was about to speak when Su Hui, Bai Tingting, and the rest hurried after them. The team leader frowned. "Why are you trailing after me instead of fetching tools to work?" Su Hui said, "Team leader, my stomach hurts today. I want to ask for leave." The leader glanced at her and waved a hand. "You may go back." Hearing this, Bai Tingting quickly added, "Team leader, my stomach hurts too." One after another, the other young female, educated youths claimed stomach pains. The leader's face darkened, but he could not blame them. Few young women from the cities could endure such labor. He waved them all away. Watching Su Hui and the others leave, Fu Qingli was about to say she also had a stomach ache and head back. The team leader shot her a look. "You do not need to pretend stomach trouble. You are exempt from work today." Fu Qingli blinked in surprise. Pardon. The team leader looked at her. Follow me.